Yeah, I have one item. Someone in the community has mentioned to me a couple times about the new, well, it's not super new, but the stop sign. I think it's Second and is it Stevens? What's the main street that you go up? Yeah,
The flashing one?
yes, the flashing one. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. I said, it's always been working when I've gone by it. So the last time I saw this person, they were like, no, it's not working. And she said, I pinpointed it to the morning, early morning. And I think the battery maybe runs out, so it's not flashing in the morning, because it's one of the, I don't think it's hooked up to electricity. I think it uses the solar panel. And what was concerning for her is that that's kind of a time where that stop sign is more difficult and people crossing the street, getting to school or the buses and it's dim. It's, right in the morning when it's coming up. So I don't know if there's a bigger battery or another way to make sure those are operational in the mornings. I just wanted to throw that out there, that this person has brought it up multiple times, so I wanted to say something about it.
Or sunlight with electricity.
Yes,
Oh,
right. I know, the time of year when we need it the most is the time of year where there's very little sun.
Exactly. That's-
So, yes.
Great, thanks for bringing that up. Anything else? All right, and then just double check. Okay, we do.
Oh, I'm sorry, I do have some.
Oh, yeah, go ahead, Councilman.
Yeah, let's see, I know we have the, economic, development item for nonprofits on the agenda, but other economic development items, specifically those that we may decide to fund on a more citywide, basis, I think those are still, a very possible thing as far as I know. Thanks. But, anyway, and I realize we also, probably won't have time, today too, because we have, I'm looking at the wrong one.
We have a pretty sparse agenda.
We have a tax agenda today. I got the wrong.
Not packed. Today's not packed. Today's
Oh,
pretty
It's
thin.
not, oh, I got it right here. Yeah, we do have our AOC presentation.
Well, yeah, yeah.
That might take a while, but anyways, at the end of the cow, if we have time. Can we talk about that?
I don't know with cows how that works, because we don't like formally adopt the agenda at the beginning like we do in a council
Yeah.
meeting, but one thing to know, I don't know if we'll have time on this, Cal. The human services grant actually is happening during the council meeting, so the only
That's
two
right.
things for the cow we have is the ERC presentation and the housing needs assessment, in addition to the written reports.
Right.
But what I'm wondering, if what he's talking about, I don't know if you're doing anything in your admin report on what he's talking about, or if we were to pull, because I didn't know if the economic development and body worn cameras were two things that might just get pulled down into the normal agenda to have a presentation and talk about. Is that loosely related to that, or is it a separate topic?
I guess we can pull the nonprofit grant, policy off of consent. Because we have a couple things that we might add to it to improve the policy. Which would then generate other conversation about economic development activities, which we could have. The exercise that we did last time, I have not worked up yet because we have a pending issue that came through council requests, but we could probably have that conversation if we pull that policy off of consent and have a more global conversation around economic development.
Yeah, do you know off the top of your head when, I can't remember, on the planning calendar, when you think that would come back, that other portion of it, like next month maybe, or a little longer?
No, there's a more detailed conversation actually that would probably have to happen on council because it's a decision point on how we would proceed with some of the economic grant opportunities. I would not have it planned for council until I get council agreement on how to proceed.
Okay. So I don't know if that answers, like, it sounds like we might be able to have a little bit of conversation tonight, or possibly
A
it
little
might be
bit.
better suited to.
Yeah, I wasn't expecting
Talk about
any
it.
detailed conversation
Yeah.
about items, but a little bit of the, of the items that we have listed out, maybe, well, if the council has any other ideas, certainly we can have those, but of the items we do have listed out, maybe get a feeling for what the priority is among the council, what do we think is most important? Of course, based on, some of the information we got back from the business owners.
So maybe we just need to schedule a little bit of council time to hit on some of the things you're talking, that you want to discuss. Does that sound like a plan in between?
Yeah, and so if we want to add, I don't know how we, because it's been noticed, add discussion items to cow.
I don't mean today, I mean in the future, sorry. I meant like next month or some other time, maybe that's just something we need another, like you were saying, a touch point to discuss.
It actually would be useful to have that conversation tonight if we pulled the human services
Yeah.
grant policy off of consent and did it tonight.
The,
Because I need direction on
Okay.
how to move forward with,
So,
Councilmember Schaefer's point.
yeah, so when we get to the council, and this, so we're kind of rolling into, I think this is organic, to roll into a review of regular meeting agenda, because this is usually where we talk about anything that we have simple questions on. I think there are some questions on the economic development grant policy and maybe body worn cameras too. So when we get to the council meeting under additions and corrections, that would be the time to say that you want to pull things off consent, and then we can go from there, and then we can have that discussion. Does that sound like a plan?
it does, although there's actually nothing I want to pull off consent, I like to have.
So it doesn't mean that we're not agreeing to move forward with it, it's just simply pulling it to
Oh,
create
okay.
the agenda item, so
Gotcha.
then it's open for
Gotcha.
discussion, but we can still pass it tonight, it's just not all in the consent. Okay,
Great.
was there any,
The
oh,
reason I do this, and I think you guys know this, I'm feeling a little bit of urgency here, because summer is fast approaching. And if there's anything that we can do from an economic development point to get a big, a bang for our buck this summer, I'd like to get involved.
Yeah.
Okay.
okay, all right. Okay, so with that, I think we'll go, did you have anything, or are you good? Okay. We'll go ahead and move on to our first discussion item, which is ARC presentation. I don't know, am I gonna get over to you? Director Lenfest?
Yeah, thank you. And then John, I'm not sure Tom has been promoted properly. He might have been just added. I don't know. It's kind of.
I can see you all. Can you all hear me?
We can see you. We're trying to get Tom figured out. He promote, so there it is. That's the second one down. There you go. I think he's now promoted. Okay, Tom, and you're in. Cool.
Can you hear me? You can't see my video, but can you hear me?
Okay, so just a quick intro to the group, maybe some question on why we're back. It's been a month. We want to bring back some of the project summary tables because there was the thought on it was preliminarily like an apple to an orange. So they worked on the numbers, we kind of talked about those as apple to apple. Make sure there's no new questions based on how those fund numbers or finance numbers change. Sharing some of the survey data, and then Tom is here until another meeting he has to jump to talk a little bit about other strategies on the project itself. Final slide is just an update on the schedule. Just trying to be present, honestly, to make sure everybody's where we're moving forward, and we all want to move to completion of a project that the city is, proud to have. So. Just a quick chance for touch in, and I don't expect to take the whole meeting by any means. And I will open it up to Daniel to start, and Tom, you two will work out your slideshow. John has it on the screen for us, Daniel, so if you are ready for next slide, just say next slide.
Yeah, next slide. Thank you, everyone. Sorry we couldn't be there in real skin. We last time we heard from you, we realized again that we did not have sort of an apples to apples view of the asset outcomes. And so we revised the 3 slides that you're going to see in this next series for City Hall, Police, and Public Works to better address that. And if I could, I'm not sure if I can, I can't share screen either. Okay, so that's okay. That's all right. Let me see also if you guys can see my scribbling Can you see that?
I can.
Can everybody see a red circle on the screen at all?
Yep, see edit.
Oh, good. So I just wanted that to be able to highlight where we were. But if you recall, I'll remind you that to be able to look at these comparatively, when we build new, we had an expanded program of, for instance, with City Hall, 13,815 square feet. And if we wanted to look at that in comparative to a retain and renovate situation with City Hall, we have to look at the deficit of what the program would be required to expand that. And that's what I'm circling here in this green line. So you have to make up that much program in either a new or renovated City Hall. And the way we looked at it here was essentially it would be the cost to build a facility deficit elsewhere. When you add those numbers together, again, we get a renovation number here that applies to the existing building square footage. We take that total and we add on the new deficit here, which again is based on a cost per square foot. If you could just page down a little on my screen here, I can't see the very bottom of this slide. If you guys can, yes, you can see that the green line is again taking a number that's again a deficit cost of $682 a square foot for a new facility that includes the land and development. All said together, that becomes this total here. And when you add those up, you get a full number of $9,817,980. That is now apples to apples in comparison to what it would take to renovate and build a deficit elsewhere, what it would take to build new. So that was the corrections we made in listening to all you folks last time. Other notes of point here also is that we, of course, just in this slide, we're trying to show you what the new program includes. It's a very quick summation down here at the bottom. Again, just keeps us all on the same track. Again, very simple bullet point that describes the program expansion. Tom, was there anything more to talk about there with that?
No, I think the only, the $682 comes from taking your new facility and dividing it by the square footage, assuming you would have the same building costs, land costs, site development costs.
That's correct.
That's where the 682 came from.
I think the other just neat little percentage also is to point out is that this percentage here also just quickly tells you the percentage of what it would take to expand the program from the existing condition compared to, again, the new program, which is of course building it out at 100%.
Question, or it's not even a question, I guess it's more of a comment. I guess the one call out I'd make is obviously if you're comparing apples to apples in terms of value versus cost, I think that's an accurate comparison. Obviously with the existing city hall, you already have the land, so you're not acquiring it. It's the cost of doing the renovation and the expansion. I still think, I mean, it highlights the differences you're getting at a higher sort of total value, equivalent square footage with a lower lifespan. But
Yeah.
I did want to highlight that one point, because obviously the 456 and the 400K of the building value are pre-existing.
That's a good point to make too. Thank you, Councilman. Next slide. Similarly, police is looked at the same way, did the same exercise here. And again, you can see the comparison of this. The deficit for police again would be about that square footage as compared to new. And again, apples to apples comparison are these numbers to build and to retain and renovate and to build new. This one still we have listed as, if you look at the bottom of the slide, again, just to be clear here, it includes the requirement for a population of 12,000, which I know you folks were still, again, maybe questioning in the long run as to what that number should be. But right now, that's what our program document bases this expansion on.
Councilmember Apple?
Yeah, I think this might have come up at the last meeting. We have invested a significant amount of money in renovating the existing building. And so what I'm wondering is that $3 million to renovate existing building, does that take into account all the improvements that have happened and are happening?
No, Jennifer, that still does not. Yeah. And we could dial this one down again a little further to include that.
And I just want to double check. So your recommendation is that we double the size of the police station? That we need twice as much space as we currently have?
Yes, that's what the program numbers are still shaking out to be. We haven't changed that from what we originally heard. And again, through the chief and the program expansion as part of that.
The bulk of that expansion is for evidence storage, tactical training, and non-occupied personnel spaces that you lack now in your existing facility.
What kind of tactical training space?
So
Could you describe that? What do you mean by tactical training space?
that's where they practice their takedowns. They practice how they approach a suspect, how they disarm them. So there's a certain amount of, that's called tactical training. There's also that doubles over for major meetings, as you go on and off dispatch. So it's a multi-purpose space, but you don't have that in your existing facility.
I think that, city administrator.
Yeah, so anticipating a potential question here, we haven't changed the program philosophy yet based on potential staffing numbers. So this still maintains the staffing numbers that we originally talked about. Once we kind of get the philosophy and the apples to apples approach here, those numbers might change. So there's still opportunity to finalize the slides here and the program estimates, but at this point, we want to get to a place where we can all agree on the conceptual layout of this, like get the thinking right and comparing apples to apples, and then we'll perfect the numbers.
Sure. The growth in square footage is not necessarily affected in a big way by staff numbers. It's affected by special purpose spaces that you need to operate the police station. So you could have less staff numbers, but that's not going to necessarily erase your requirements by very much. And I think we provided you the worksheet for police, the detailed worksheet. And if you go through that, you can see where the existing versus the growth requirements are.
And if not, we can get that to you again. Since, yep.
I have it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Cynthia. More questions here? If not, we'll go to the next slide. In very similar exercise. I think, again, this one is clearer as well as far as the expansion, again, of the existing is about, and again, compared to the new program is about 34%. And we'd be looking to make up a deficit of about 26,000 square feet in a new, in a renovated or new build in comparison. So again, very fair comparisons between all of these. This one also, if we pan down a little so I can see, you'll see there's definitely a significant change in the building cost per square foot, and is rational. There's a lot less conditional space that we're thinking about, because a lot of these, if you remember, are open covered shelters for equipment and trucks and vehicle parking. There's also the potential for what's called a pre-engineered metal building structure, and those costs can save significantly when you build with that type of architectural building. So you do see a significant cost reduction in the price per square foot. In case you're looking at that and going, oh my, why is that so different? That's why. Very good. We have to at least keep moving along here because I know Tom is having to go. And if we go to the next slide, sorry, go ahead. Was there a question?
Still slightly confused on comparing apples to apples because retain, renovate, you've rolled up the existing land value and existing building value into the total cost to renovate the existing building. I mean, that's money I don't understand why you did that, because it's not anything we have to spend money for, right?
Exactly.
I didn't hear all that, Dan, did you?
I didn't either. I heard, I think existing land value and existing building value is. Sorry, we've lost you in that.
I think the only point, if I understand the question, is existing land value and the building value is what those properties are projected to be worth that are underneath the public works and the police and the city hall. And if you're building new, the presumption is you're going to sell those or dispose of them in some way. So we're canceling out those values and reducing the amount of cost it would be to build new. So they're the same numbers, whether they're renovate or build new. They kind of cancel themselves out if you sell them and credit that against your renovation or against your build new options.
Yeah, that's why I would expect to see those two values over on the right-hand side under build new, because
They're in the light blue, less sale of existing lands and buildings.
okay, so do they roll up into the total to renovate existing buildings value also?
Yes. The very first two lines of the retain and renovate are land value and building value. And then on the build new, the third line down in blue is the less the sale of those existing lands and buildings. And
Yeah,
it's just those two lines together.
that makes sense. I just don't understand why you have those two values included in the total to renovate existing buildings.
Well, it's just because we want to see what you've invested in it. So if you renovate, you've got the cost of the renovation, but you're doing it to an existing asset. That's why we've listed the land and the building as a total, so we could compare that apples to apples again against that build new option where we have to buy land.
Councilmember Schaefer?
Yeah, I believe the concern here by Councilman Supple is that we're primarily concerned about out-of-pocket expenses. Not the ending land value. And so it would make sense, assuming we agreed to sell the properties, it makes sense to have those on the right-hand side but it would not make sense to have those on the left-hand side as part of the total cost. Now, obviously, we could do that in our heads, but it is, as Councilman Sullivan said, it is a little confusing for us in fact, I didn't really notice that Billy pointed it out, but I think it would be clear to show that in a different way. If I was constructing this, I would. Sorry about that. Okay, if I was constructing this, I would actually just leave those off the left-hand side, leave those two costs off. And add them onto the right-hand side with, with parentheses around them showing that they're actually a net gain. Maybe, I can't tell, maybe you did that.
I think the confusion is in the line that says renovate existing buildings. That is the number, so that's the 3633344 minus those two values up at the top that you guys are talking about. So I think that's causing the confusion is the number we're interested in seeing is the renovate existing buildings. And bolding the one that includes our already invested money, like in the land value and the building value, is just throwing us a bit off. Does that make sense? I think that's where it is.
Because it's not represented as a true cost, it's a value. If it's an apples to apples comparison on value, then they make sense, but if it's around cost to reach point A versus, or compared to point B, then those aren't costs on the left-hand side.
So I think for council that we can know to look at that, line right above there, if that's the number you're looking for. One more
Yeah.
question, Councilmember Napkin?
I think the problem is that total to retain, build elsewhere. I think we want to have like this total out-of-pocket cost, which would be the renovate existing building plus the cost to build the extra deficit area of building. So it should just be on this slide in particular, 2,659,000 plus the 2,047,000. That added together is the out-of-pocket cost to reach the amount, the space we need. We don't have to again pay for the land in the building, so why would that be included? So it's that $5.68 million that is inflated. We won't have to out of pocket spend the land or the existing building value. It doesn't make sense ever, like.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you're looking at two ways of approaching it. One is, what have you invested under retain or build new versus what are your cash flow requirements? And if you're looking at cash flow, then you don't need to take account of your existing land and buildings. But if you're looking at a life cycle, which is how much you've invested, if you retain versus build new, then you do need to include the land and the building.
Mhm.
So there's two different ways of looking at it. This one, what we presented here is the investment approach, not the cash flow approach.
No, I think both could be valuable, but I think in our heads, we're thinking, how much out of pocket will we have to spend to achieve one or the other?
Sure.
Yeah.
The other thing is, the council has not really had any detailed discussion on sale of existing land, and I have a feeling there'll be some debate. If we should hold on to those or not. That's not a given by any means.
Yeah, and
Correct.
yes, we haven't assumed that either, you folks. That was the next, it was really the topic of the next workshop, in-person workshop. So.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you all. Again, hopefully we're getting closer. Next slide, if we could move, if you guys don't mind. We really want to do, I think you all saw this. Cynthia has done great to run this survey. We made it just look a little more pretty here in this presentation. But Cynthia, would you like to just sort of introduce and go through some of this with everyone?
Sure. So in not this council packet, but the council packet before, or at the last council meeting, I included the survey that I put to staff. We had over 2/3 of the staff respond in some way, either to the survey results or provide answers on a variety of questions. I think a lot of council has viewed, most of council viewed that document that I sent over. So the questions were really designed, let me see if I can bring it up, because there's no way I can do that.
I did email
Okay, so the questions that I asked staff were, because you know, the staff have been here for a long time, they have a lot of perspective, particularly in working inside the buildings. The first question is it important for City Hall to remain in the historic center of Duvall? You can see here the majority of staff said no. And then if you go to the other documents, that there's question number 2 is explain your answers, and staff had a lot of, I think, good and thoughtful responses to that question. The next question was, what do you think is the best approach for the future of City Hall? And really the choices were the existing structure should be renovated, or a new City Hall somewhere should be built. I did not ask where City Hall should be built, more of, because there are so many options and I didn't really want to steer staff in the direction that would got way ahead of council. But you can see here the majority of responses from staff were a new City Hall somewhere. And then we have 35 responses to explaining your answer, which I provided council. And then I asked the question of what different departments could City Hall have? And then follow up. What was that?
Oh, I was just gonna say next slides. Yeah, no one's changing the slides, so that was.
Yeah.
There you go.
You know, and the obvious ones rose ahead. I mean, certainly we want a mayor's office in City Hall. That doesn't exist now.
Excellent.
Next slide.
There you go.
My office, the finance department, the clerk and deputy clerk, so the obvious things. But there was a follow-up question on whether or not the police department and City Hall should be combined. We had 35 responses to that question.
So can you go back, John, sorry, what was the? Oh, this is the question, okay, sorry.
So that pie chart actually is a different question. What other city or community uses would be important to have in a new or renovated City Hall? And the responses, and I had pre-filled some of them, so emergency operations, a cooling and warming center, conference rooms for community use, space for youth and senior programming and other. And so again, you have all of this in last meeting's council packet with the detailed responses. And then I asked a series of questions to staff on what do you think would be the best use of the rec center and the visitor center? And we got some
Listen,
details.
next slide. Next slide. Yeah.
I don't hear anything. Did we lose a connection?
I don't hear them either. Can you hear me, Tom?
I can hear you, yeah.
Can you guys hear us?
Oh, there we go.
There we go. Okay.
Sorry,
Guess we lost Cynthia.
you all did that.
I'm here, maybe not speaking very loudly. But you know, quite a few staff had an opinion about whether or not these buildings should be kept and renovated or sold, and you can see those in the comments that I included. And then again, I've only been here 6 months and, you know, staff have a lot of knowledge. So I asked the question, what didn't I ask that would be relevant or, you know, important for council to consider in deliberating on the use of the public buildings? And so you have the responses there as well. And some of which are not particularly relevant to the building, but still, you know, good feedback from staff. So I've included all of those there for your consideration. So I Really appreciative of the staff in participating in the survey. They had a lot of good insight into what it's like to work in the buildings here. So I encourage you to take a look at everything that they wrote.
Councilmember Mercer?
This is really more, a follow-up question for Cynthia, because I think we discussed this a little bit at the last meeting. I mean, this is a high level sort of 5,000-foot view in terms of, I know you probably had other internal deliberations in terms of, how it affects their ability to work together or productivity. It would be great, not necessarily tonight, but to get, but I think that's also what we're, as we have these conversations sort of working through is finding the right mix of space configuration, cost, and then, empowerment for staff to be more effective, do more with less, improve communication. And I think sometimes we talk about this in some of the offsite, we don't always have visibility to some of the current challenges. I think we hear, space is tight, but and Steve, I didn't get a chance to follow up before heading out on vacation, but that's probably some of those conversations as well. I think that helps council sort of understand the current challenges beyond like we don't have enough space in terms of when we start to figure out what to do next and make recommendations.
Yeah, and I'd be happy to drill down on that. The instructions I sent to staff or the ask of staff in doing the first survey was, hey, could you do this survey at OMPS? There might be more.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it's not the great work, just to be clear,
No,
just having that level of additional level of understanding and insight in terms of the specific challenges is helpful.
Yeah, I absolutely do not view it as kind of make busy work. I think it's really important for staff to have some amount of voice in this process. And I received some appreciation for sending out the survey in the first place and asking staff to give input. And I think they'd be happy to receive a second survey that drills down, maybe at a lower, more granular level on, okay, what are the exact challenges of working in these spaces that are either, too small, don't have the tools or space that they need to effectively work together. I mean, just off the top of my head, not having conference room space to convene either an all staff meeting or portions of all staff is pretty disruptive. There's only so much you can do on Teams.
Yeah, I just want to say really quick, I love this survey so much and I'm excited to hear more will be coming as you drill down. Because I think when we look at the longevity of the life of the building, it's more than just how long the materials last, right? It's how it's designed. That's a big part of it. And will it be relevant in 20 years or can it be changed in a way that makes sense for how our work changes or how our meetings change? I couldn't remember, so sorry if this has been somewhere. I love the format of this. Are we gonna duplicate this or tweak it somehow? Is there a version for the community? I can't remember at what part, if that's happening in this step or this phase, at what point do we bring the community in and ask similar questions, not about what's it like to work inside, obviously they don't know, but some of the things that come up about having those meeting spaces, what's important to our community in terms of a city hall. It's gonna be a different set of things, and I wanna make sure we capture that. So I don't know if that's something council should work on with you and try to develop something that, again, we're at a high level. But how do we start sending this message to the community as well and kind of warming them up to the idea that this is something we're working on now? If you want to answer first. Yeah.
Well, so I would say let's get something on the agenda so I can get from council, like what kinds of questions do you want to ask? And we can absolutely figure out a way to deliver a community engagement survey on how the community either perceives the building. So maybe similarly starting at a high level.
Yeah.
Like, do you use these? How would you like to use them if you had options? What do you not have that would feel important to have in the city like Duvall? So I think there are ways to very similarly begin at a high level. And then once you kind of see what the tone and temperature of the responses are, then drill down a little bit more.
Yeah.
But I would want to find out what you want to ask. There are also things that you don't want to ask early.
Yeah,
So
for sure. Yeah. That's
Tom,
wonderful. Go ahead, Councilmember Napoli.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think there are other voices that are, obviously the staff voices are super critical. They're going to be working in the space, but also the concept of where it is. A space that's near our economic core and near our park, a space that would need parking for employees could also provide parking in the evenings and weekends for events and for shopping. And, there could be a real win-win economic development component to the location of a city hall. And just, asking the business community, aside from just, putting out a survey for people that live here. Anyway, that just got me thinking more about how there's a lot of different aspects about, location and size and types of spaces, making sure that we include the community and the businesses. Get their feedback. Yeah.
Tom, I didn't want to put you on the spot because I know, again, so council doesn't get confused either. We're not really on board to do the surveys, but I'm sure, Tom, you wouldn't mind if Cynthia took the first pass at the questions or something that you
No.
could give a review of, right? And
Oh,
sort
yeah,
of,
I think that'd be a great idea, Cynthia.
yeah, we could help, Cynthia, is what we're
Yeah,
trying to say, even
sure.
though for what it's worth, I thought these were great responses, you
Yes.
all.
Useful
I think,
information.
yeah, very useful information, and I really appreciated staff putting so much detail into their answers. It's rare that you get so much. So kudos to you all and your staff for being so thoughtful. Schedule. So yes, if we just do we would like to just keep things moving here as much as we can. And so you're seeing the next couple of weeks. We know we have a lot of outstanding issues that we had addressed before with all of you, especially relative to the overall report. So my consultants will be working on that in coordination with the city staff over the next couple of weeks into the first week of May. We'd like to have by the 16th final draft facilities assessments and corrections essentially of the report to you all. And then again, I didn't confirm with you all yet and or Steve, but again, made the assumption that maybe we could have a final workshop for the visioning and some financial strategies by the 23rd of May. Again, we had promised once we get our heads around all of these numbers, we have numbers for all of these full, complete new projects. We can again specifically give you some strategies of how to finance those. And then by June, having a final deliverable to the city. So that's what we're on track right now to do. We want to keep pushing this along. And as council member said at the beginning, summer's coming. We know that everyone's got a lot on their plates. Do the best to keep pushing this forward. Questions? More questions, comments?
No, I just want to thank the ARC team. I was one of the council members that requested the information you presented today to get more of an apples to apples comparisons. And this did indeed go a long ways in doing that. So thanks for your understanding and action on that. I know we need a few more tweaks on it, but nonetheless, you guys made a big step in getting the information you saw today. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilman Schaefer. We appreciate it.
So I think you guys are about wrapped up. My question I have maybe for the group here and Cynthia, if we want to try to formulate some questions to get them out sooner than later, not that it's not going to disrupt the schedule this whole year, but we don't want to have another council meeting until the 2nd. Do we want to have a small group? Does council want to delegate a couple people to participate, like just the staff? I mean, we can do anything we want, of course. I just don't know if we want to bring it back to the next town or what, because it's the next meeting is set, right?
Would council want to I think what he's saying is we could pick a few of us, 2 to 3 potentially, to work with staff on formulating survey questions for the community and for businesses. Maybe it's 2 separate surveys, I don't know. And then that group could potentially work in the interim between the meetings and actually bring back some rough draft so that it moves a little quicker,
Or
or
get that, or if it was simple.
we could do it by
Formal
email too.
acceptance, send them out.
Get feedback from the whole council. It would save a little bit of time if we wait and bring it back to the meeting, and then it just has more time. So you're feeling like time wise that we need to move a little quicker potentially. or-
Well, I mean, I don't want to rush it, but like, I think.
So we're gonna incorporate it into the.
Things are gonna get
Yeah.
away from us, because other things are gonna come up, just the thought, not gonna be pretty.
Councilmember Napoli?
I think that's a great idea. If maybe there are a small group could kind of brainstorm some starting questions, send it out to the whole council if there was feedback. Not that we might have an outside, but maybe the feedback would go to city administrator. I think that would be I like that idea.
I'd be happy to volunteer, because you all probably know how I feel about steering. But I'm also happy to step aside if there are 3 other people that wanna, I would love to take a crack at it, whoever else wants to do it.
You have your eyes on surveys featured on it now.
Yeah. If no one else is available, I'm willing to do it, but I don't. I mean, if other people want to do it, I step back.
The one shaking my head in the opposite. Anyone else? Corey, no pressure. Just wanna make sure, raise your hand if you need to talk.
And I'm happy to get us started.
So it sounds like myself and Councilmember Naplin, and we could kind of brainstorm and work, and Cynthia could send us. I don't know, we can figure that out offline, I suppose, and then send out some kind of rough draft to council. And then you guys can all look at it before it gets sent out. Sounds like a plan. Yeah.
Thank you all.
Good idea.
Is there anything else on this, or we?
You guys have any other lingering questions on items before we cut you off?
We're good.
I'm just curious if there's any other updated, documents that we could get to review before the next meeting, because I know there were other questions about some of the numbers that we're feeding in, and we had been told that some of the stuff was preliminary, and I think, Rebecca even mentioned, yeah, we identified some issues.
Is the May 16th date when, is that, I'm reading like corrections, is that when council?
Yes.
would receive them by
Yes.
email as well?
Yes, by 5/16, again, I keep calling these drafts, so you guys always have the ability to make comments, but by the 5/16 date, I'd like to have all the answers to a lot of your other questions compiled by then, as Jennifer was asking.
That wouldn't be a meeting date, that would be.
You would be getting something, Councilman Jennifer, yeah.
And then, I don't know if council saw this, if you're on your computers or not, but Director Lenishevsky did send out the screens that we've been looking at right here, so they are in your email too.
Yeah. And if anybody has comments, again, as we always say, feel free to share back. If you see something within this and you want to put a comment down, just do it and get it to us through the channels, and we'll respond accordingly.
Well, thank you very much for your time tonight.
Thank you all. Nice to see you again.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tom.
What's that? Oh, okay. So our next item then is our housing needs assessments. Is that with Director Thomas? Oh, with. Oh, Laura, we can't hear you.
Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Our senior planner, Naomi, is going to be giving a presentation this evening, and she should be in the room.
Yep.
Okay. And so I'll hand it off to them.
Thank you.
So really quick, I wanted to introduce Betty. She's with Duvall, and we have to explain the survey first, since you've been talking about surveys. She's going to explain the process behind the survey. And then I'm gonna get them to talk about the results, so that way everything is crystal clear for everybody. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask. Welcome, Betty.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Betty. I'm with Blue Line, and that one is not.
Oh, for the housing, yeah.
I think the title of my presentation is called HAP Survey.
You're right. Yeah.
So if y'all are curious about any specific questions with the survey or the wording of them, let me know. I have the entire survey here. Next slide, please. There are two main channels that somebody can go through the survey. Everybody starts out with demographics, but then it splits them off into I live in Duvall versus I don't live in Duvall. The people who do live in Duvall are then divided into renters, homeowners who have a loan versus homeowners who do not pay a monthly rent or loan payment. From there, the renters and the loan owners, man, that's hard to read. I'm sorry, guys. We get into like the barriers of making their home payment, and the homeowners skip that question and go to, have you ever tried to buy a home in Duvall? So to go back to the bottom row, I don't live in Duvall. If they don't live in Duvall, we ask them if they're unhomed, and if they also get the question of, have you ever tried to buy a home in Duvall? But they then skip the satisfaction section of questions and go straight to the services and comments. Next slide, please. So these are the demographic questions that we asked. Just got an age, employment status, race, before tax income, current home type, sharing housing costs, if they share their housing costs with anybody, and the time they've lived in their current home. Next slide. The question that we use to separate if they live or do not live in Duvall is this. It's do you live or work in Duvall? So we kind of divided it between I both live and work in Duvall, or I only live here and commute or work elsewhere. And then anybody who answered that they do not either live, they do not live in Duvall, got directed to the other avenue of the survey. Next slide, please. And so that we're about to go into the I live in Duvall section, which divides it into 3 different avenues. Next slide. So this is the question that we use to divide it even further with the renters. Describe your current home in Duvall. Next slide, please. These are questions that we asked everybody who was renting. They are mirrored to the mortgage questions. However, we asked the renters if they had any barriers, if they faced any barriers during the rental process. And if they pay their last month's rent on time, their confidence in being able to pay the next month's rent, and any challenges paying rent in the future. And that was a select all that apply question. Next question, please. And again, this is mirrored to the renters, but they were not asked if they faced any barriers in finding a rent. Next slide. Everyone was asked, have you tried to buy, have you bought or tried to buy a home in Duvall? And when you were trying, did you encounter any barriers? Again, this was a select all question where they could select any barriers that applied. Next slide, please. The people who live in Duvall were asked about to rate their current satisfaction with aspects of their home, or to rate their satisfaction with current aspects of their current home. And some of the categories include like the location, the size of their home, their access to amenities, or their access to public transportation. And we also asked them what type of home would fit their needs. Next slide, please. Now for the people who don't live in Duvall, next slide, please. We asked them they are unhomed or homeless, and we asked them to kindly share if they're willing to share any circumstances that led to them becoming homeless. Next slide. And again, we asked them if they have tried to buy a home. However, because we wanted to keep the avenues of the survey distinct, I didn't link them back to that. And next slide, please. And they end up also ending up at the end. However, they skipped the satisfaction. Next slide. Services and comments. This is what everybody filled out at the very end of the survey. What services could the city provide to help you? Some of those included legal advice on eviction, foreclosure, or other issues, access to home buyers class or counseling. And we asked them if they agree or disagree with some statements like Duvall is a great place to live, Duvall has services and amenities that improve my quality of life, or Duvall is a good place to live for older people. And then they were asked to rank their preferences for future housing types in Duvall, and we provided them with townhomes, duplexes, senior assisted living, accessory dwelling units. And then there's just an open comment section, and we asked them if they would like to be more involved in feedback, then they could provide their contact info. Some of these people were contacted. And that's all. Does anybody have any questions? Next slide, yeah.
Just a sort of a high level question, sort of a survey response rate, and then for some of the questions that you obviously had some open-ended questions where they could just provide verbatim. We'll get into obviously how the specifics, but just at a high level, did you feel like it was there any feedback in terms of awareness, or did you feel that the sample that you received when we start to look at the actual data is sort of representative of the broader population we were trying to survey? Because that's the challenge we sometimes have to develop. Sometimes we get very good response rates, and sometimes we get a pocket of that sort of gravitates to one set of responses or another.
Yeah, that would be a good question for Naomi. She has the full
Okay.
survey results, and we're still working on processing and analyzing the data.
Okay.
Yes.
I have one question about the last slide just before this. There was a question about, there we go, rank preferences. So was that question asked to try to get feedback of, if you were needing to purchase a house, what would you want? Or because some of the people are unhomed or renting and may want something. But then there's also people who are responding that are very happy in their own house. So what do you ask? Are you differentiating between, like, is the question asking what you would want, or is it asking hypothetically, what do you think Duvall needs to meet some need?
The second one. It's
Okay,
yeah.
that's what it is. Is that how it's written?
Yes.
Okay, sorry, I wasn't sure exactly how.
Would you like me to read?
Sure, that would be helpful. I couldn't remember.
Outside of the most common type of housing in Duvall, aka single family homes, what type of housing would you like to see to accommodate the growing need? Rank the choices by order of preference, where the top of the list is top preference and the bottom of the list is least preferred.
Okay, that's actually really helpful. Thanks. Any other questions?
You, all right, thank you, Betty. I'm going to stand up. I think so that the camera can see me, and if you can see the screen, that probably would be the most helpful, or would you prefer that I stand in the corner? It's hard to sit still when I'm talking. Yeah. So thank you so much, Betty, for giving that information. She's the one that created the survey. It's more complicated than I thought, to make sure that you're asking the questions and getting the information that you need. To give you an idea of what happened, as far as what we did to try to get as many people to respond as possible, we went door to door. And we basically, we reached out to businesses. We asked them to have their employees take the survey. We posted on Facebook. We just asked to spread the word. So we did it the old fashioned way. And you'll see that we actually captured a pretty good array of respondents, as a part of that effort. So I think that might be a good method going forward. Next slide. Okay, so this is what I'm going to talk about tonight. That was the introduction, and then we're gonna go over the background of the housing action plan just as a refresher. And can you go back to the other slide?
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. Thank you. There we go. I made it too fancy. And then I'm gonna go over the process. What does this all mean? And then we're gonna go into what public outreach has happened, what's gonna happen next, and then we'll open the floor for questions. Okay, next slide. So here's the introduction. This is a refresher. Some of you have probably already heard this, or if you've seen the planning commission meeting, you went over some of this information. Next slide. So broad to narrow. So I'm going to go over the broad idea of this first. Why is this happening? As I'm sure you've heard in much of the media and based on a lot of the legislation that started in 2018 and 2019 and now, there is the general consensus that there's a housing availability issue, widening gap between the amount of housing that's available and the number of people that need housing. And so there has been a response to that. Next slide. That response began in 2019 with a House bill that came through, was legislated, became official, went into the RCWs. When that happens, there's different state agencies that are responsible for promulgating that in terms of regulation. Washington Department of Commerce was the responsible agency. They also had funding available to help assist cities in updating their policies, and then as a consequence, updating the regulation. So that's where the money came from in order to make this happen. Next slide. So now a little bit of background what this means for as far as policy writing, when I use that phrase. Next slide. And this is what it looks like as far as looking at a picture. It's broad and narrow. It starts at the state. We are what some people call in planning a top-down planning state. That means that rules start at the top and then they trickle down, and it ends up falling to cities to be in compliance with the Growth Management Act, which basically dictates everything that we do as planners, more or less along the environmental requirements. But you can see here, if you're ever curious, you want to go back, if you want a copy of this PowerPoint, you can look up that legislation. So you can see the language that we're pulling from to write these policies to be consistent with that language, and then how a regulation consists with that. Next slide. So the housing action plan, what does that have to do with the comprehensive plan and our regulations in our code? So the housing action plan is a supplementary document. It is a little bit different than, but also supplements the comprehensive plan. It is basically the precursor to the housing chapter in the comprehensive plan. But it also contains other things. So you can look at it as a small book that's going to be added to the big book. What it also contains are actions and strategies, and that's a little bit different because it's not just policy language, which is usually broad. Strategies and actions basically function to say, this is how we're going to do it, and then here's the implementation. This is when we're going to do it and what our timeline looks like. So it's a little bit more specific, a little bit more action oriented, in which there's a goal and a projected result. Next slide. Okay, so now we're going to go over the process. Next slide. And this is what the process is like. It happens in much more than 4 steps, but if we broke them down in order to save time in a presentation, there are really 4 major steps. The first step is to do the housing needs assessment. That's already taken place. We have a draft. Right now, what we're doing is looking at that draft and making sure that the data, the population data, is correct. We want to make sure that all the information that we're basing this policy on is accurate. So the document is finished. Now we're just putting it through quality control. Then the next step was public outreach. We are in the middle of that. One thing that I want to bring up that I haven't brought up in the other presentations is that public outreach doesn't happen in a vacuum or a capsule. public outreach is always happening. That's the mindset that we are taking. If I go and buy a soda at the grocery store on my lunch break, I'm gonna be talking about it. I talk about it all the time, like probably a nightclub promoter would talk about it, constantly talking about it. And that's going to continue beyond the housing action plan, because housing also doesn't exist in a bubble. Housing is connected to infrastructure and economic development. So as my director moves forward with a comprehensive plan, we're going to be surveying people again and reaching out to people. So basically, public outreach is a part of this. The public outreach in and of its own is going to continue beyond this. Right now, we're in the middle of it as it's focused on housing, but of course, when we ask questions about housing, we get answers about other things too. And then at the same time, we are also writing the rest of the chapters of the housing action plan. That includes draft strategies, draft implementation. We have some of those put together right now. Those are going to be shared with 2 different housing policy advisory group meetings. We have people that have volunteered to participate. We have 2 meetings set to go, one this month and one next month. And we try to recruit a broad range of individuals. There are others in the survey. We gave them the option in the survey that indicated they were interested in being more involved. We received a number of names. So we have that list as well. Finally, once those documents are drafted, we get feedback from the advisory group. So I'm talking about step 3 right now. By then, our public outreach will be more refined, we'll have more information, and that will inform step 3. And that will all be pulled together to produce a complete draft housing action plan. At that point, we'll be coming back and showing that to you. Next slide. Okay, step 1, I just described that to you. It's complete. We're looking at checking the numbers. We want to make sure it's accurate. Next slide. This is step 2 in progress, public engagement. Please feel free to constantly talk about it when you're out and about. People that have additional questions, send them my way. Next slide. Also in progress, to see all those bullet points, we are doing that right now. And I'm actually very excited to get to the point where we can come back and present some of these ideas with you. It has been a pleasure to engage with the community, especially since I've only been here for about a month. It's been a wonderful experience to do public outreach here. Next slide. And then step 4, that's planned. That's when I'm excited to bring, when we get to that point, bring it to you with a bow on top and see what you think. Next slide. And now we're going to talk about public outreach. So before we go to the next slide, what I want to emphasize is that the raw data that we received from the survey comes from a portion of the respondents. We received, I believe, 133 respondents. One of the respondents, they responded in Spanish. We would like to see more. I believe that there's certain pockets of Duvall where there's more Spanish speakers. So that's one thing. And I wanted to leave that as a question to you if you want us to do a second survey to capture more of the population, but I'll leave that question to you for after this slide presentation. Next slide. Okay, so generally public outreach in our public engagement plan, it has a couple of goals. The reason it looks like this is because it's not linear. It's a term, I'm trying to think of a simple way. It's cyclical, it goes back and forth. So it's not from one step to another. So I put it in terms of goals. We're constantly informing, but we inform first. We're constantly consulting, but we're consulting with the public, but we consult second. Then we make concerted attempts to involve the public. Then we make concerted attempts to invite them to collaborate. And then we gather. And part of the gathering is meeting with the policy advisory group twice. If for some reason people contact us and say, we want to have another group, then we'll do it. It's completely open to what the public wants to see as well. And then finally, we report our final findings after Betty has completed the analysis and we get closer, which is probably going to be in about a month. Then we're going to be reporting that back out into the public, which will be Facebook and other methods. Next slide. Okay, hard to read, but again, you can take a look at this if you want. This shows how we're tracking public engagement. What we've done so far, if it's a one-time thing or if it's something that's ongoing, where we're at and what's going to happen next. Next slide. And these are two of the other goals, so you can see where we're at and what's going to happen next. That's also in your packet. Next slide. And finally, that's the last step. Next slide. And this is the actual time tracker, so you can see the dates that things started. Some are continual, but you can see we're moving down the list and moving towards really trying to collect as much information as possible. Next slide. Okay, we are now at the housing survey. So go to the next slide. Demographics, next slide. So what I did with what Betty was showing you is we took the topics and I put them into clusters so that they make more sense. The first thing that I want you to notice is that majority of the respondents are right in the middle. We did get respondents in other portions of the demographic, but this is, you can see that actually reflects the population statistics as well. If you look to the top left corner, you'll see a question number. As we go over each response, you'll see that those numbers are in chronological order. The reason that they're not is because that number reflects the question on the survey. And as from what Betty showed, it has this whole branching out effect. So in order to provide this information to you in a way that makes more sense, certain non-chronological questions will all be clustered into one topic. Next slide. Okay, so this is from question 3. You'll see that we ask questions about race. That graph is pretty obvious as far as what the mix is. Next slide. If anybody wants me to stay on one slide longer, please let me know and we can go back to it as well. So I'm going to walk up here so I can see it a little bit better. But here, this question is, before taxes approximately, what was your household total annual income last year? So you can see here that the income lives in 2 separate areas. That gives you an idea of its connection to affordability with housing. Next slide. And then the next question is, which of the following best describes your current employment status? 59.84% are full-time employed. And then the second most is employed part-time. After that, it's self-employed and freelance. We have a couple of students, 0 people said they were not employed and not looking for work. And then we also have stay-at-home parents, but a wide variety of people, with a majority of them being full-time employed. Next slide. This was the question that branched off that Betty was talking about. Do you live or work in Duvall? The reason that we asked this question is because we wanted to know if somebody is working in Duvall, did they grow up here? That's one of the interview questions that we asked, which you'll get another meeting from us. We'll be presenting that, but we wanted to know, well, how many people are working in Duvall but really want to live here? That's what we wanted to know. So 47.62% live and work in Duvall or are retired. And then 30%, well, this showed up differently than I have on the slide. I live elsewhere and work in Duvall, 17%. But a majority of them work elsewhere but live in Duvall. I'm going to fix that. My apologies. Next slide. Okay, have you ever bought or tried to buy a home in Duvall? 86.81% said yes, and 13.19% said no. Next slide. Working but not living in Duvall. Next slide. Why don't you live in Duvall? 48.15% answered home prices are too high. After that, the next biggest answer was over here at other, please specify. We got written responses. We're still putting those together. We didn't want to give you the raw responses, but there were other responses that we got from people as well. And then you can see that all of the other answers are kind of in the same range. Next slide. Now we're going to look at some of the information from renters in Duvall. Next slide. The question was, when you were going through the rental process, did you encounter any of the following barriers? The number one barrier, 72.73%, said it couldn't find a place I could afford, followed by not applicable, and then the last one was other, please specify. So there are a couple of other barriers too. Next slide. Now we go into payments and affordability. Did you pay last month's rent on time? 100% said yes. Next slide. How confident are you that your household will be able to pay rent? Next rent payment. Slight confidence, a little under 10%, moderate confidence, moderate confidence, a little under 10%, and then high confidence was 72, almost 73%. Next slide. Next question was, if you were concerned about paying your rent now or in the future, what challenge are you facing? About 10% said, someone or myself lost a job. About 10% said work hours have been cut, reducing household income. About 10% said I am sick and unable to work. A little under 34% said I cannot afford my rent. And 10% said I now have kids at home and I am unable to work. A little over 10% said I have a sick family member and I'm able to work. And we've got 22% I can't renew my lease because my rent is being raised. None of the above, we got quite a bit of an answer there too. Next slide. Homeowners in Duvall. So these questions came out of homeowners. Next slide. Select the answer that best describes your current home in Duvall. A little over 10% rent their home. A little under 15% own their home free and clear. And a little under 65% own their home with a mortgage or loan. And then about 3% occupy their home without payment of rent. And 5% said I do not have stable housing. Next slide. Next question was, when you were trying to buy a home in Duvall, did you encounter any of the following barriers? Almost 40% said I couldn't find a place I could afford. And then the next biggest answer was a little over 50% not applicable. Next slide. The question was, did you pay your last month's mortgage on time? 100% said yes. Next slide. Next question is, how confident are you that your household will be able to pay your next mortgage payment on time? Moderate confidence was about 8%. And then you can see here about 90% said high confidence. Next slide. If you are concerned about paying your mortgage now or in the future, what challenge are you facing? So you can see here, these are some of the same challenges for renters, but there's a lot less challenges when it comes to home ownership, with most of the people answering not applicable. Next slide. Homelessness in Duvall. Next slide. Are you homeless? Almost 20% said yes. Now, this is only a fraction of the survey takers. This we had some write-in responses, so we can share that additional information too. Almost 80% said no. Next slide. Next question is, please tell us if any of these circumstances have led you to becoming homeless. 33% said lack of affordable housing. A little under 17% said unemployment. And 67% said fleeing abuse. Next slide. Living in Duvall. So this is some of the questions we asked people about how they see living in Duvall. Next slide. When did you move to your current home? Most people said 1 to 5 years ago, followed by the next highest answer, 11 or more years ago. So a lot of new residents. Next slide. Which of the following housing types best describes where you live? Single family residential, was the biggest answer, and that was 80%. Next slide. I share my housing costs with. The biggest answer was a spouse or domestic partner. And then the other two equivalent next highest answers were either a family member or not applicable. Next slide. How happy are you with each of the following aspects of your current home? 1 means you're not happy at all, and 5 means you're very happy. So you can see this was a weighted scale answer. It's pretty even across the board, with the least being access to public transportation, and the second least being monthly rent. But the rest scored pretty high. Again, you're going to get a more detailed report. This is just the first blush of what we got from the survey. Next slide. What type of home do you feel would fit your needs? 91% answered single family home, detached from any other house. And then we have a little around 10%, 50% different answers for other types of homes. Next slide. Outside of the most common type of housing in Duvall, what type of housing would you like to see to accommodate the growing need? Remember, this was the question that Betty was talking about. 3.72, which means most favored. If it's less, that means less people thought that was the best answer. Townhomes and duplexes and triplexes got 3.72, so 4 would be the most favored. And then we also had 3.25, which was followed by multifamily. And then a close second would be senior assisted living, followed by manufactured housing, which was the lowest, and then accessory dwelling units. So the top 2 were multifamily housing, townhomes, duplexes, triplexes, or similar. Next slide. Which of the following services could the city provide that would help your housing situation? So the 3 highest was help paying rent or mortgage. That was followed by help paying for home repairs. And then the next one was access to affordable housing unit. But we got some significant answers in other areas. For example, information about tenants' rights. We also got help paying for utilities. And then one over here, which was education on property management, which was interesting that some people picked that as well. So we got a variety of answers. There weren't a lot of answers where no one answered, which is a good indicator that we captured a broader population. Next slide. Next question is, how likely are you to agree or disagree with the following statements? Duvall is a great place to live. So disagree would be red, and then strongly agree, or strongly, and then strongly agree would be the dark green. So, and then agree would be green. So most people think that Duvall is a great place to live. And then the next question is, young people can find comfortable, adequate housing. And you can see the answer is a little bit opposite. Next slide. Duvall is a good place for families to live. You can see the agreement here between the 2 greens. And then the next question is, Duvall is a good place for older people to live. It's a little bit more mixed. Next slide. How likely are you to agree or disagree with the following? Duvall has services and amenities that improve my quality of life. Almost 50% answered agree, and then it's a little bit mixed. And this question, or this answer is, I am concerned about being unable to live in Duvall. Let's see, within the near future. I'm not going to use this font next time I present to you. I can't read it. But it's a little bit more mixed. So mixed feelings on that one. And then next slide. We made a word bubble. So the word bubbles, this is a preview to the next presentation, is these were the words that came out of people's write-in responses. So that might be an indicator of the words that were used most frequently when people wrote responses. We got some people wrote like a novel. So we need to go through that and really parse that out. Next slide. And that is all. I'm going to go back over there. If you have questions.
Any questions?
Yes.
Councilmember Shuffle?
Yeah, the percentage of homelessness in Duvall seemed higher than what I've seen in other surveys.
Yes,
No, is there a reason for that, or is that just a result of an artifact of the question, the way the question was asked, or is that a true indication of homelessness that was like 20% or something like that?
right, yeah, I was quite surprised too when I saw that, so when I first went over the raw results with Betty, there is a correlation, but we want to confirm it that we have a nonprofit in town called Acres of Diamonds, they actually took the survey. So that could be part of it, is that we did get response to, we did receive it write-ins from there, I guess.
Based on my prompting, that they participate in the survey.
Oh,
Ah,
okay.
Thank you, I'm like, I mean, we were trying, I'm like impressive, so.
Yeah, Councilmember Natlin and I did a tour and encouraged them to participate in the survey so we could get a broad, broad subsection of folks participating.
And then it seemed like on a couple of the slides that when I tried to add up the percentages,
Mhm.
it was over 100% on the answers, like 120, 125% of that.
Interesting, that could be because of the way the answers, divide out, but we'll work on that, we can people pointing that out. Yeah.
Do you know which bracket one?
Well, I'd have to go through it. There were like 2 or 3, I think, that I know.
At least it's not all of them.
Is it the ones at the end, like with
There's one at the end, and one in the middle.
Yeah, that's kind of complicated, but it gets tricky when we're having them, they say like not happy at all versus very happy, or not applicable.
No, it wasn't that type of question.
No, okay.
No, it's not very much.
Yeah, the other one I was gonna ask, and, it's like they have to wait for the verbatims as you aggregate some of the data. This obviously isn't an economic development survey, but there were a couple of around the reasons for not living or things you needed, and it was around transportation. It would also be interesting to see how that correlated to access to services or access to, because I know that's one of the interesting things that often bubbles up in terms of living here versus somewhere else with a veteran community versus a community. And we're in a good area with Redmond Ridge, just not too far, but if you don't have a car or you are limited on transportation, to see how some of that correlates, because whether that's a driving factor in terms of whether they live here or not, or it's sort of an indirect, that they're likely gonna pick somewhere closer or somewhere that has better transportation, like it can be a decider or it can be a factor in the decision making. It's often hard to get just from the questions until you get into the verbatim data. So it's good to hear that this Bucks wrote a book, albeit it requires additional work to dig through them.
Thank you for bringing that up. One of the other pieces that we're still tabulating now is we want to be able to reflect the voices of the individuals that we've spoken to at a deeper level accurately. And so that's why we didn't include it in this, but we have done 6 interviews. And so that was a series of questions and those individuals agreed to be included as a part of the housing action plan. Those were, we tried to, again, to capture a broad range of individuals with different experiences. But while we were canvassing and getting people to take the survey, we did talk to the businesses, sometimes the business owners, and we did ask follow-up questions like, what are your employees going through when it comes to finding housing? How far do they have to drive to get here to work for you? Have you lost any employees because of that? So, but I can tell you, based on the 6 interviews we did, the transportation piece came up a lot. It's a broad statement, not exact, but.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Other questions? Councilmember Schaefer?
Let's see, a comment on, I guess, on the housing needs assessment. Time to bring that up, or?
Yeah.
Okay, so this, I glanced through the whole thing, I did notice, one thing, and I think needs attention, and this is down, it's the page before public engagement. There's a sentence that says, develop anti-displacement strategies, including strategies to minimize displacement of low-income residents resulting from displacement. So it's an awkward reading sentence, which isn't really what bothers me, but what does bother me a bit is, we really do need, I think, to specify displacement of low-income residents, resulting from what? Because there's just the whole gamut of things. So, property taxes, we all suffer from, high property taxes here in Kane County. Inability to pay the rental mortgage, inflation, loss of income, unexpected expenses, all those types of things. And if we want to develop a strategy to help those people that are facing displacement, we have to decide which ones. Is it all? Probably not. If not, which ones are our favorite? Then from a city, city point of view. Because there's only so much we can do. I think it's important for us to prioritize what we're able to afford, what we're able to actually take action.
Thank you very much. That's perfect time because when we have our two housing policy advisory group meetings, we're going to go over what does the term displacement means as it pertains to a city.
Good.
Because the term displacement means something different than we went, for example.
Good point.
But here, yeah, and that question was also posed in the interviews as well. What have they seen? We interviewed two people that have been here for 30 years, people that just moved here, people that are being displaced from other areas that came here.
Yeah.
So, thank you for bringing that up. That is good advice. Councilmember Allen?
Yeah, I had a couple of comments. First, I noticed that, and just a quick request, if we get the information again, is it'd be really helpful to understand the actual count in addition to the percentage, because some of the questions had very few respondents just because of the flow that went through. So for example, the homeless, 20% seems like a lot. Well, how many people ended up in the flow of the survey into that category? It would be helpful. And some of them where there was, 10%, 10%, is that because only one person, you know what I mean? Or is it more a global 20% of the people, or is it a low response question? Anyway.
No, that's good. That's great. Thank you.
And then the other thing that you had brought up earlier was, should we put more effort into getting a response from the Hispanic community? And the other thing I noticed was the mobile homes only received, I think it was 1.57% of the respondents. And those two communities, I think, intersect from what I've observed. And I think it would be interesting to get their feedback if we didn't get very much. And I think it can also tie back into the displacement idea as we're thinking of solutions. And I just think of what was at the state legislature just recently about, duplexes, being allowed in all areas. And what can happen is the most affordable homes end up being the ones that get redeveloped into those duplexes potentially, because they are for a small investment, you can replace it with a large duplex. And so I think that's the type of displacement that I'm really concerned about as we look at ideas. If you zone certain areas with higher density, a lot of times you end up displacing the most affordable homes. Because that's the cheapest land to purchase. So I think I'd like to. And the mobile home park area, I think is one area that we would be concerned losing. And there's a lot of families that live in there.
Director Thomas, I see you have your hand up.
I was going to wait until council's completed their questions, and then I'll wrap up with one item that we had a question about for the entire council.
Jennifer, were you done with your? Anyone else? Councilmember Lovett, we heard from Mike. And
Oh.
Councilmember Mercer, did you have anything or did you already?
I asked.
You did, okay. I think the only thing, and then I'll go back to you, you basically already answered my thing I was thinking when I was reading through all this earlier, which was, what's the hard stop point for public engagement? And you're basically like, kind of doesn't, you keep engaging, and that just made me so happy. Is the survey itself ended, or does it stay open?
We closed the survey just so that we could, you know, push people to take the survey, but we can reopen it, and we can reopen the Spanish survey if you don't need to use, what Betty now, and she'll open it back up.
Okay, that'd be really interesting, to, I don't know, keep it open-ended, if that's an easy way for people to submit feedback, or if it's easier for them to just email you, I don't know.
Possibly, yeah, I'll consult with Director Thomas.
That sounds good, Councilmember Schaefer and then Director Thomas.
Okay, no, I think I answered my.
Oh, okay. Go ahead, Director Thomas.
Thank you and good evening officially. I will be home after tomorrow. I'm still in Texas, but we did want to follow up because we didn't technically feel like we got enough respondents. We have about 135, and I think we'd like to push it at hopefully up over 200. So we did want to open up the survey again officially and push it back out if council's amenable to that. And then I think what we'll do internally is we will visit our manufactured home communities within Duvall and take a card and drop at each door. So kind of like a door dash. And if there's anybody on council that would like to tag along or help us, that would be awesome as well.
You read my mind. I was thinking, you know, we've got a lot of people right here. We go door to door. We've certainly done it before. So yeah, I would be happy to help with that as well.
Thank you.
Director Thomas, I think I've asked this question, but I'm not sure that I remember I know I don't remember the answer, so I'm asking it again. Is there a deadline for when this work has to be completed?
Great question. Yes, there is obviously a deadline. We are working with Commerce to extend it to September because our valley got such a late start. We're all in about the same place, and we'll actually be doing an updated contract that will allow us to complete the work by September. But we do need to have a draft by the end of June of the housing action plan.
Anything else? I'd like to add something.
Yeah, go ahead.
Quick. Is in the spirit of public outreach, the next thing that we're going to be looking for that you'll see posted on Facebook is, we're looking for photographs. Betty came out and took some great photographs. We're going to get a photograph of all the different types of housing involved. But if anyone here knows anyone that is an amateur photographer that has beautiful photographs, the more the better. That's our next phase, because we want this document to actually speak to what the city is about. And second is that we would love to have drawings from children K through 12 of what housing means to them. Because we want to include that in a chapter of the housing action plan as well. That's awesome. So please ask around. I'm also going to post that on Facebook. We might make it a contest. And then also visited the Grateful Bread. Saw the art in there. I'm assuming at least one of us in the room knows a local artist. Aside from photographs, it would be nice to include the artwork from the people that live here that reflect homes in Duvall as well. Nice. All right, anything else?
Okay, we're getting somewhat close. I think it'd be good to maybe go ahead and close out here so that everyone can take a little break since we started earlier. So we'll go and adjourn at 6:44. Thank you.
Maybe you got my email.
Hey, John, did you get me promoted to a panelist?
I was trying to make a panelist, but it said that you declined.
Okay, I'm gonna try, she said, and someone's gonna even figure
Oh, I'm sorry. Maybe ask me again.
Um,
John, can you resend the mayor the meeting link?
Laura, you can.
sure.
What was that, Steve?
I just sent it to the mayor if you can tell her.
Okay,
My Teams is being finicky.
I know everybody's got weird things going on tonight.
I sent it to her in a message, so hopefully she can do that. There she is. John, did you hear from Councilmember Isaacson at all?
I did.
You did, so he won't be present.
He
then,
won't be
right? Okay,
present.
thank you. Sure.
Speak wet.
Is everyone here? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Excellent. So is everyone ready to rock and roll tonight?
Yes.
All right. All right. Well, thank you. I'm away to work conference, so please forgive the remote attendance, but I'd like to call the meeting to order on Tuesday, April 18th at 7:05 p.m. And would you all please rise and join me in the flag salute? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Clerk, will you please take the roll?
Good evening, Mayor Oaklander.
Here.
Mr. Isaacson. Mayor, he's not here, but I heard from him saying he was not going to be able to attend.
Thank you.
Mr. Schaefer. Here. Mayor Pro Tem McHenry.
Here.
Mr. Mercer. Here. Mr. Supple. Here. Ms. Naplan.
Here.
Mr. Lovett.
Here.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. We do have a quorum. And with that, do we have any additions and corrections to the agenda this evening other than the excused absence of Councilmember Isaacson? And
I raised my hand up, sure if you saw.
oh, thank you. It switched from gallery to participant view. So go ahead, Mayor Pro Tem McHenry.
So I think for additions and corrections, we wanted to pull the body worn cameras agenda bill and the nonprofit economic development grant policy into the normal agendas for, so we can talk about it from our questions.
Okay. Sounds great. And then those will go under new business after the human services grant discussion. So with that, do we have a motion to approve this evening's council agenda?
So moved.
Should,
It's been moved and seconded to approve the council agenda. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say no. Motion passes. And with that, we have presentations up first. First up is the concessions policy.
we'll start.
Good evening, council. So tonight, I just wanted to have the opportunity to talk with you about the concession policy. This is a policy that we briefly discussed as a council a short time back. I received some feedback from council members, and this policy is the result of that. Staff has had a chance to take a look at it and had some, fairly limited comments and input on it. And so the point of tonight is to answer any questions you may have, gather any further input that you may have, so that we can polish this up and bring it back to you for your final review as an agenda item. I'm happy to go through that. I can throw it on the screen, depending on what type of process you all would like. It's not too long. It was in your packet. And so how would you all like to proceed? Do you want the highlights, or do you want to give feedback?
So Mr. Kenny, I would recommend doing the highlights and then asking for council feedback. And I can manage that conversation.
Perfect. And I'm going to share that onto the screen so that we can walk through it. I don't have that ability. As we get that going, I'll just start. So let's jump to 020 in the policy. It's the second section. The types of concessions allowed. The goal here was to make sure that it is a clean and confined experience for the concessions. So we're talking about prepackaged sealed foods, canned drinks, things like that can be easily managed, not cooked, not prepared in the sites, or nothing hot or served. Also could include the sale of goods and clothing, things with logos and things like that. Pretty simple stuff. Things that are not allowed: glass bottles, sunflower seeds, peanuts, and gum, forbidden from being sold because we don't want them on the site.
I think you can share screen.
Oh, great. Okay. Perfect. Okay, so. Perfect. Okay, so we're in 020 right here. You can see that. And so any questions or comments about a limited scope? So again, there's going to be no hot dogs. There's going to be no chilies that people are bringing from home, no prepared pizzas or whatever, things that are hot foods, prepared foods, messy foods, none of that. And then also from a management perspective, for the field, obviously no glass bottles. We don't want broken glass. We don't want seeds and things that litter the ground. And so it's kind of your typical just grab and go type stuff.
I'm not seeing any hands on that section.
Mayor Pro Tem.
I have my hand up, sorry.
Oh, thank you. And actually, if just a side note, like we did the last meeting when I was sick, if folks could log in to Zoom on your computers and raise your hand that way, then it'll be easy for me to see if you keep that on mute and it won't interfere with the audio. So those that can, please do. Go ahead, Mayor Pro Tem.
So quick question, only because I've seen this with different student stores, and I think that's might be some of the groups that utilize concession. When you say that those items forbidden to be sold, which I love that we identified those, I think that's really good. Does saying they're forbidden for being sold also exclude them from being given out as incentives? I just want to make sure legally, like, does that should not be sold or distributed in any fashion? Like, is there any, because I've seen, you know, sometimes you can skate around the rules by being like, well, we're not selling it, we're giving it out if you buy this t-shirt. So is that a base we need to cover, or are we good anyways?
I have no problem adding or distributed.
Okay.
We will run into a couple of situations, like this doesn't say, or eaten, or,
Right.
you know, so like this is just the concession stand
Yeah.
policy, but that's totally fine. So yeah, or distributed, I can add in there at the end of that sentence for sure.
I'm trying to watch, anyone having issues?
I can't get it either.
Do I see Councilmember Mercer's hand?
Yeah, it was just along the same lines, the only before Mayor Pro Tem made her comment, the only other one is, and it's challenging to be comprehensive, but also narrow in scope. You know, you have like sunflower seeds, but not pumpkin seeds, or, and, you know, and there's a whole bunch of variants in that category where there's other things. I think, I don't know if there's language you could add along the lines of, or examples include, or I don't know if there's a way to frame that, Daniel, in a way that would, you know, provide the letter or the guidance, but without being specific.
Or similar,
yeah.
I can put something like that in there. I don't think, God, it's been a while since I've had pumpkin seeds. I think the idea is shells. So,
Yeah.
so pumpkin seeds are just simply,
But like pistachios or peanuts, you know, they're
casual pistachios.
Yeah.
It's pumpkin. Yeah, I totally agree.
And again, it's not to be all inclusive, it's just, I can see some people gaming that, well, you know, it's not this, but I have this other
Yeah.
thing. Just so that from the folks renting, they know that it's a broad category.
Yeah, absolutely.
I can't get on Zoom.
Councilmember Zaplin and Councilmember Naplin.
Thank you. So I'm just thinking of the concession stands that I've seen at different games, and one thing that's very popular is having a popcorn popping machine, which is sort of cooked, but it's not something that needs to be held at a certain temperature for food safety. That's something that, when the concession stand was used, our concession stand, they did have the popcorn machine. And then the other thing that is quite popular, because it's so cold here a lot, is ramen. So it doesn't need to be held at any certain temperature, you just add hot water and hand it out. That's a pretty popular item too. So I just wanted to get clarification, because I have a feeling those items will be wanting to be served, because it's pretty popular and common. So I don't know how everyone else feels about that, or how it would be interpreted in the current rules.
My read on it, I have not thought about it until just this,
Yeah.
would be that ramen would be no. Because you'd need hot water and it would need to then be prepared, so it's kind of either prepared food or hot food. I'd be a little bit worried about handing out boiling water without having kind of a thoughtful, you know, kind of hot food type distribution behind it. I get why that would maybe be appealing. And then popcorn, again, as written, I don't think it would work. I'll leave it to you all to decide. I mean, we could specifically call out popped popcorn. You're going to then have, I think, you know, kind of channeling my Steve a little bit here, a little bit of maybe way more of a mess inside or wherever it's being prepared. It's also hot. You also have oils. Oh, I will stop talking. Director Lynch, because raises him.
Good evening, Mayor Council, Steve Liniszewski, Public Works. I would say this is the inception of a document. I mean, we can be as hardlined or as opportunistic as we want to try. Just all I can tell you is the more food particles you're going to have that make it onto the floor, right, the more things we're going to attract. We're in the woods, raccoons, possum, rats, like eventually they won't be there during the event, but you know, overnight. So just things to think about. I know they like to hand out popcorn. You go to the high school events, like I said, top ramen. We don't have an Insta-Hot, so somebody have to bring like a little boil kettle, that kind of stuff. So we could keep it pretty basic to see how it goes. But, you know, the flip side of that is then all you're handing out is candy, and how good is that? So something to try, something we want to check in on here and there, but I'm not too concerned. If it gets to be bad, we're going to tell you like, hey, we got to get rid of popcorn or something like that. Does that make sense?
Yes,
You can always amend the policy with any of this.
yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Councilmember Schaefer?
okay, thank you, yeah. I mean, originally when we talked about opening this up, we decided, I think we talked about keeping it more constrained as opposed to less constrained, and then, modifying it as time went on. And, potentially widening it out, but things like, like popcorn, even if it's prepackaged, just distributed at the site. I mean, we all know what happens to popcorn. 5-year-olds carrying the box around and it spills, or I'm carrying the box around and it spills. But, ramen and things like that. So I think what we have here is pretty darn good to start with. And there's, like I say, nothing to keep us from adding to it in the future if we, decide to do that.
I guess I would just point out too, that in theory, this is beginning to take form at the beginning of the summer. And so maybe some of those things, we can see how some of it goes and add when it gets a little cooler.
Sure.
But up to you, of course. Okay.
I was going to say one suggestion would be as well is that for the individual users, there in the future, as the policy is amended, there could be additional fees for those that choose to serve the ramen and popcorn, since there's additional cleaning costs and maintenance costs for the building. I think that most people can carry flasks of hot water to the events, and those that are prepared do. So I think that if we start out small and then provide an option in the future, that might be good. But I think one of the things we need to think about is, to Director Lanchevsky's point, is in the varmints, the rodents that come in, and the mess and cleanup and damage to facilities that occurs once you start introducing those more complex food items to the concession stand.
And I think to the mayor's point too, I would consider the sale of ramen just the package to be fine under the policy.
Mm-hmm.
So if they did bring water, there could be things like that maybe you could facilitate it partway and people could bring their thermos or something like that. Okay, well, more comments anytime, but we'll move on to the next session. So it's the 030 section right here. So this section, the highlights here are, of course, it's the interior of the concession stand that would be part of the use. Then we've added two components on the outside. One is a 5 foot by 7 foot area on the outside where a table could be placed. So you can place things outside. I think there was some comments by Director Lanchevsky and others that maybe the window is a little bit small. We'll see if that can get replaced. Also, it's more inviting if there's a table with things, maybe you can stand out there. I think that would be identified on the ground in some way. We'll leave that TBD in the moment, but probably be marked on the ground. And then in addition to that, then there would be the opportunity, and this was, I think, probably a new idea since our last conversation from Director Lanchevsky, a 10 foot by 10 foot pop tent that could be placed over that. It needs to be weighted down. We don't want to create a sail that just takes off in the wind or anything like that. But if it's placed directly over that 5 foot by 7 foot area and gives some shelter, that would be additional benefit. So no storing items anywhere else except for in those identified areas. So again, inside the concession stand, small area outside with the ability to put a tent over that.
I can't tell, is Mayor Pro Tem's hand up?
Yeah, I'm doing it on Zoom too. I'm not sure if you're able to see that. Sorry.
I was not, but thank you.
I'm trying.
It's we're trying here.
I don't know if it's somewhere else in here, so apologies if I sped through this too quickly. Is there anywhere where we do say or need to clarify to not fasten anything to the building or attach anything to the building? I was just thinking, like, do people understand that, like, we should be using sandbags, or I don't want somebody trying to rig something up or backwards head to a window, so that's just, I tend to think of the worst case scenario, so there you go. Just something maybe we stick in somewhere here, unless it was addressed somewhere else.
It was not, and I will add that. Thank you.
Right, thanks.
And Mayor, just an adjunct comment to that. I think you were specifically referencing around the tent.
Mhm.
The other is just around like
Yeah.
flyers, tape, posters. I think folks put those up, but there should be something, in terms of,
Mhm.
we've all walked by a wall with all the remnants of the concert posters and the flyers in terms of, I don't know how we want to monitor that, because I didn't see that in there either.
And it was not, so I think that would be a great section to add. I think what I'm hearing, and I would concur, is no attaching it to the building. Probably they would attach it like to the front of the table,
Yeah.
maybe at the window or something like that. How does everybody feel about that? Thank you. So we'll add that in. That'll be probably someplace kind of towards the middle of the policy. When it's there. Okay. So cleanup and waste is the next section. It's 040 here. So there are going to be two deposits, whether or not they can be kind of lumped together in terms of $1 figure. We'll figure that out. But one's going to be for cleanup. So you have to have a cleaning deposit. And you have to do a checklist for cleaning prior to leaving. That'll be established later in terms of what you need to do. You need to sweep the floor, you need to wipe off the countertop, you need to do whatever that may be before you're cleaning up. That includes the outdoor area too. Now, they're certainly not going to clean the whole park, right? It's going to be the area that they were designated to use. All waste must be placed in the designated dumpster. There will be a dumpster key. So that's another, so you've got a key fee and you've got a cleaning fee. And so I think use of the dumpster, I'll let Director Laniszewski speak to that in a second, but I think there was still some question on whether or not that's something we want to open up for use. I would venture a guess that you're going to get much more than just the concession sales ending up in that dumpster. And it's another key as well. And so it's their responsibility to clean up, and if they don't, or if they fail to do anything on the cleaning checklist, could result in forfeiture of cleaning deposit. So that's kind of the structure of that, is using the dumpster and a checklist to make sure that people keep the area clean. Any thoughts on that?
Mayor Pro Tem, and then I do have some thoughts as well.
I am of a couple minds on this. I'm a little torn on it because I feel like if we don't do dumpster key and don't allow that access and monitor it, that all the excess trash is gonna end up just in the trash cans around the park, right? So, that being said, I think, the kinds of groups that would use this could deal with hauling out their own trash, but there will be significant trash in general as we get concessions being sold. So I don't have a super hard opinion on that. I just wanted to throw a couple things out there that I don't know that would they be generating enough trash on their own to need to do the dumpster. But we'd want to make sure they're not like folding up cardboard boxes and shoving them in and blocking up our normal trash cans. So I don't know. I don't really have an opinion on it. I just think of issues either way. So I'm not sure. I'll leave it to everyone else to talk about.
Any other council members before I share my thoughts? Not seeing any. One thing I would like to see changed is to not just require dumpster, but require separation of recycling, garbage, and compost. Since we do have yard waste available and food waste in the city of Duvall, much of what will come out of the concession stands is recyclable, especially when we're looking at plastic bottles. And that can have a significant volume and make sure that we're being good examples and good stewards of not just the field, but the environment as we put this policy in place.
I can certainly add that, yeah.
Are there any objections from council? Not seeing any. Thank you.
Director Lanchester has his hand up.
Director Lanchewski.
Yeah, thanks. Just a quick point on that. We can certainly work that out. Great idea. I don't believe the dumpsters we have up there are segregated. So I will double check. I know we do have recycle cans as well as garbage cans, but something just for us to follow up on. But yeah, the point
thank you.
too of having the folks renting it use the dumpsters is to not fill up the garbage cans on premise. So that's the hope.
Yeah,
It's all a trial.
thank you. Thank you, Director Lanchewski.
Question for Director Laniszewski, and this is just more around the keys in general. The way I read this, there's sort of separate keys, a key for the concession stand and a key for the dumpster, and it talks about that being returned. I don't know if that dumpster key would live within the concession stand and then they would, lock the concession stand, or if there's a way to get them keyed the same or on the same thing. It's less around the policy, which I think is fine. There's some logistics that probably could be streamlined to make sure, limit the loss of one or the other keys by having it either live within the concession stand or as I said, share a similar key.
Yeah, we do. Thank you, Councilmember Mercer. I would expect there's a key for the dumpster inside the concession building that lives there, kind of like the spoon or stick of shame at like a gas station. Something you don't want to take with you, but you want to put back, because that key would not be as expensive to replace as one to the door lock set itself. So that was our thought, because we do lock those out. I'm sure you folks do, or maybe you don't know. We inherit a lot of garbage. People leave chairs and ottomans and vacuums all over the place. And normally they do it where people can't see it, which is up by the ball field. So just trying to discourage the abandonment of larger objects. That's why it's locked. So that does tend to keep people away. Not everybody, but most people. They'll try to find a place to put it that's out of sight. So.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, I can go on to the next section. So scheduling. So the idea with scheduling is organizations that are reserving the adjacent sports fields have the ability to essentially simultaneously reserve the concession stand. And if they haven't done that 30 days in advance of the date, another nonprofit can take advantage of that and apply for and receive a concession stand permit for that period. So admittedly, this is fairly limited to start. And I think that was, again, one of those goals, is to start a little bit smaller to go wherever you want it to. But I think there was a recognition that use of the fields kind of goes with the concession stands, at least to some extent, but maybe that won't transpire and somebody else will want to do it. And we limit that to nonprofits so that you don't have the bakery going up there and trying to sell things with that part. No offense to the bakery, I'm sure. Any thoughts on that? Well, I guess I would just note too that it's reviewed and approved on a first come, first served basis. And so what that largely means is, as you're booking your field, you then have the opportunity to book the concession stand. And so maybe there are some, I don't know anything about it, but maybe there are some entities that are really on it and they book out fields and they know what they're doing and they would have this opportunity. Other people would as well, but it would just be corresponding like that.
All right, and not seeing any hands, so I think we're good to go on that, Mr. Kenny.
Great, thank you. Okay, so access. So again, key deposits that will cover the cost of rekeying for both the concession stand and the dumpster. We can fine tune that fee. The fees are going to have to go in the fee schedule. If the dumpster key is, I don't know what it would be, merely a padlock and the cost is very low to replace that, then of course we're not going to charge $200 for that, right? But we want to make sure that we've got that covered. Also, we want to make sure that people take it seriously so they don't just say, well, I don't care about my $5 key deposit. And then I tried to make the return location as generic as possible just for the policy, because we'll fine tune that. Maybe it'll be different solutions depending on how that goes, but it's a lot for other identified return location. And so the city will provide access to that. Both must be returned before the conclusion of the use each day. And you should not leave the park with the keys, or allow them to be borrowed or copied. So essentially, they need to stay at the site. So you don't go check in the morning, go to Costco to get all your stuff and take your keys with you for the concession stand and then come back. Or obviously just walk away with them. They're intended to stay there. Any comments on the key plan?
I have a quick question.
Uh,
Mayor, is it okay if I just go?
Go ahead, Mayor Pro Tem. Thank you.
So if you have someone who is a repeat renter, is the key deposit something that they'd be allowed to keep filed for the season or something like that? Or do we need to write anything specific about that? Or is that just something that can?
It's a fantastic question. Next section gets.
Oh.
No, it's a perfect lead in. So we'll go to the next one. So the cleaning deposit and the key deposits are required for each use. If they have more than one rental scheduled, they may choose to roll that over to the next use. We want to make sure that's documented and approved by the city, though. We don't want somebody to just say, oh, you've got my money, don't worry about it. We want to take it and say, this is good for the next one. The way that I have it written here is over to the next use. It's not just, you've got my $45 for the year, don't worry about it, I'll come knocking at the end of the year. We want to keep track of that so that for each use, if the key disappears, we go to that thing or that use. And then there'll be intervening uses as well. And so, yeah, so to me, it's just a matter of documenting and getting the stamp of approval. Doesn't have to be any formal. I mean, that could be an email, that could be, a revision on the permit or something like that, just by hand. Any thoughts on the deposits?
I'm not seeing any hands. Let me double check online for Mr. Levitz. I'm not seeing any at all. I think we're good to go, Mr. Kenny.
Thank you so much. So the second last section is damage. So obviously the permittee is solely responsible for any damage to the concession stand in the area on the outside that occurs during the rental period. We wrote that if they identify damage at the start of the period, they should document that with pictures and email that to the public works director. We can provide something, in that application, in that documentation that says, send pictures here. My thought is that it's a fairly straightforward way to use a smartphone nowadays. If people don't think that that's feasible for everybody, we can come up with another way to do that. What we don't want to do is, like it says at the end, we don't want people to check the key back in and then email the city when they get home that night and be like, oh, by the way, the window was broken. Because there's no way for us to know if that happened by somebody over the prior night or something like that. And so we want to make sure that they have an obligation to document that damage before they start to use it. Any thoughts on that?
Not seeing any Mr. Kenny, so I think we can move on to the last one.
Great, and so this is just that, if you violate any of this, there's the deposits that might be taken or prohibition on future rentals. And so if somebody doesn't return the key and so they have it in their car the next day or for a few days and nobody else can rent it or something like that, or if they leave it a mess and they don't clean it up, we'll want to keep track of all of this and make sure that they're held accountable for that actions. It's nothing crazy. It's the fee deposits and the future use.
Mayor, just a follow-up question on violations. Did we define when we were discussing, or did you consider, there's the organizational prohibition and the individual renter? Do we need to clarify that? Would it impact the nonprofit or the organization was renting, or only the individual that signed the name on the agreement? I just wanted to clarify the scope of what that potential restriction on future rentals might apply to. They just swap out another person and then the same organization just does it with a different face.
Yeah, so the way that I would envision the permit looking and the application looking is there's a name. It's not an organization. We want to make sure we know who's held responsible, who's got the key, you know, who's going to do the cleanup. I'm, like you said, I'm sure that there's many people that are going to be associated with that, but we need somebody, you know, whose name's on paper, a phone number, contact name, things like that. And so I think that's who it would apply to. I don't think we could go beyond that.
Right, but I guess if you saw pattern of behavior in the same organization, then you're gonna think twice before, you know, after the third time, the XYZ club or, you know, whatever rents it. But I know it is a tricky legal issue because it's, the contract is one person's name on the agreement.
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's gonna be kind of a customer service stance that Director Lanishevsky and his team are gonna have to do is, you know, do some coaching on how it works. What we don't want to do is tell somebody that's never rented before, you can't rent when everybody else can because somebody else did something wrong. I would recommend against that. However, you know, there's definitely coaching that can happen.
Thank you.
So I guess my only last question is there anything else, like the posters and the flyers, great idea, that isn't here that you'd like to see here?
Mayor Pro Tem McHenry?
I wasn't sure if it belongs in this part or if it's somewhere else. Were we thinking about requiring proof of insurance in like the damages section, or is it just you're liable or you're responsible? I know there's kind of some trickiness there to having to get the documentation and all that, so it's one extra step, but.
So that's a great question. Let's put a pin in that. We probably need to ask our risk manager. You can get, I think it's called tulip insurance, just a single day insurance coverage for that. We certainly don't want somebody to burn it down, somebody to trip and fall. And so we want to see, I don't know where you're covered, the city's coverage will land on that. I'm gonna guess that it won't cover it, and they will need coverage. And so we can make reference to that. At minimum, we can say insurance as might be required or something like that to give a little bit of wiggle room.
And I think a lot of the groups that would be doing this already have insurance, so it shouldn't be a huge hurdle for anyone, hopefully, but.
And this is another, sorry, you can't see my hand.
Councilmember, I can if you raise it high enough. It's just, it's kind of small with the big group. So Councilmember Napland.
It's another item that, I'm not sure if it belongs here or on a fee schedule. Are we talking about charging a fee, or are we just gonna try it out without a fee to start with?
Yes, and sorry, I had a couple little notes in here. So, yes, I think there would be a concession fee for the use. That would go in the fee schedule and kind of as a stub line on that. We'll have the key deposit and the cleaning deposit as well. And so you all will need to go through a process to amend your fee schedule to get that in there.
Okay.
It's simple, straightforward, nothing crazy, but we'll get that in there and adopted. In this moment, as part of this process, don't have those fees, but yes, you will do that.
Okay.
Well, thank you, Director Lanishevsky and Mr. Kenny for all of the hard work on this. I assume that with the changes being recommended, the council will be ready to approve this at the next meeting. And the question I would have is it okay with the council to put it on the consent agenda with the changes that Mr. Kenny is going to make? Or I should say, any objections to putting it on the consent agenda? I'm not saying any objections. I'm just double checking with Councilmember Levitt online, not seeing a hand for him either. All right. Thank you very much. And so we will go ahead and move on to our comments from the audience. So with that, first of all, clerk, has anyone submitted any written comment for this evening's meeting?
No, Mayor, we did not receive any comments.
Thank you. And for those online, it looks like we do have one participant online. If you would like to provide public comment, please raise your hand and unmute yourself, and the clerk will elevate you to panelist. Right, I'm not seeing any hands raised. So we will go ahead and close comments from the audience and move on to our public hearing for the surplus agenda bill, Agenda Bill 23-31. And with that, I will open the public hearing. And the process for this is that the staff will provide the report. Anyone that's online may provide, or in the audience may provide public comment to the specific agenda bill. And then we will close the public hearing and move on to scheduled items. So with that, public hearing is open, and is it Director Laniszewski that is staffing this item?
Yes.
Great. Thank you, Director Laniszewski. You may go ahead.
Good evening, Mayor and Council, citizens, staff, Steve Laniszewski, Public Works. The item before you is the city's comprehensive list departmentally of surplus items. You'll notice in the packet there is not a resolution, so we will open this hearing tonight. We will actually have some more items to add to the list, so we'll keep it open until the next meeting. We'll refine that list, provide the resolution, and then hopefully close and then act. Outside of that, this is again things that are either not working, inoperable, or past their service life and have been replaced, like replacement trucks. Or police cars, those are on the list. We do expect to utilize an auction house that has a 10% commission on sales of automobiles and 20% commission on sales of small items outside of vehicles. With that said, they do a great job in selling it, packaging it, and getting rid of it for the city, saving us plenty of staff time. So with that said, the items again are general basics, and this is hearing 1 of 2. We'll leave this open and extended to the next meeting.
Thank you, Director Laniszewski. And if either of the attendees that are online would like to provide public comment, please unmute yourself and follow the same process as for public comment in the regular meeting. All right, not seeing any public comment. So to Director Laniszewski's advice, we will leave the public hearing open and move on to our scheduled items. First up is the mayor's report. Sound Cities Association board will be meeting tomorrow morning. The legislative session is fast approaching an end. We should have a report from the Association of Washington Cities on the affordable housing bills shortly on what has passed and what hasn't. The bill that we are most concerned about has passed, but it does not impact the city of Duvall and won't for a long period of time. So that is good news for us. And with that, that concludes my report, and we'll move on to the city administrator's report with City Administrator McNabb.
Well, thank you, Mayor, Council, members of the public. We're gonna bring up the city administrator's report. And for April 18th, 2023. So the first item that is on the city administrator's report, I'll just wait for 1 second. Oh, there we go. Next slide, please. So the same agenda that we follow every meeting. Next slide, please. So in terms of noticing upcoming meetings or providing information on what's coming up in the community, just a reminder at Depot Park, this coming, I believe it is a Saturday, the 22nd, is the annual Earth and Arbor Day Festival. It will be on Saturday from 11 to 2. So please join us there. The Public Works Department is working hard on putting together that festival for this weekend. Next slide. Our community development department has some updates that they want to share. The first is there's a monthly community development report that is in the packet, so please take an opportunity, take a look at that. We have our pre-application in for a brewery coming to Duvall. It's an exciting project. You know, hope of being a fully sustainable brewery here. So the pre-application is in. We're answering a lot of follow-up questions on other previous pre-applications. The pre-application for the mosque is also in. So the community development department is reviewing that. They have the first draft of the building code amendments. They're complete and those are scheduled to be on council of the whole on February 2nd. We also have a first draft of the permit processing policy that's set to go to the design review committee next week. And reporting out that the inspections and reviews are going well. There are a lot of them, and you'll see that data in the monthly community development report. Next slide, please. So more updates. They're extremely busy right now. Finalization of a city street tree list and working on the FAQs for tree removal and maintenance for the community. That will be completed soon. In the next council packet, you will see the RFP for the comprehensive plan and the transportation element. Those will be in there for your review. I'm hoping to get that RFP out soon so we can begin the comprehensive plan process. The parks, trails, and open space element will be separate in a separate RFP that will follow off of the comp plan and the transportation plan. The 2023 legislative session is wrapping up, and like the mayor said, there are quite a few bills that will impact community development, zoning code, particularly new comp plan requirements. And once the session is over and we know what all those are, we'll provide a report to council. And then as you saw tonight, the housing action plan is in full swing and they're doing a lot of community outreach on that, and you'll hear more. Next slide, please. So our public works department, so the updates from them, the bid for the wastewater treatment plant office remodel is this Thursday here at the Duvall Visitor Center. Right now we have 8 contractors signed up. I'm going to come, it'll be my first opportunity to see an open bid process. I'm kind of excited to see how the sausage is made. So again, we have the Earth Day event this upcoming weekend. Director Laniszewski mentioned we're going to hold the public hearing open for surplus because we have a trailer and a couple other things to add. So you see looking to trade in a trailer and get a larger one that may have a mowing machine. So we'll ultimately save costs on maintenance and it'll be a financial wash for the replacement. We have a new public works maintenance 1 hired, Matthew. So he'll be joining us soon. The police station is almost finished. I'm sure the chief is happy to be out of the dust and the noise. So that'll be concluded soon. And then we're working on quotes for an automated security door and entry system for City Hall. We're having problems with key lock. It's a very old key lock. Problems finding all the keys. The keys have been disseminated for years and decades. And so we want to find a more secure way to get in and out of City Hall. So we're looking at finding a quote for that. Next slide. So just some news from City Hall, from my office. We're doing a trial run with the Wilderness Awareness School. They asked if they could park at Doherty Farm for a few months, and we're going to try that out. We'll work on a temporary lease to document the agreement. So I just wanted you all to know that if you see the van sitting there in our parking lot, we've made an agreement with them to see how that goes, to figure out if it causes any traffic issues. So happy to partner with them to offer, a resource to them. Very good news that we received today. We prevailed in our arbitration related to the COVID vaccine mandate. It was a total win for the city, and the city's efforts to engage in an accommodation process for the employees who did not want to receive the vaccine mandate. What the city did to try to meet accommodation requests So with that, we've been kind of waiting on the news to see what the outcome of that arbitration would be. It is the first municipal arbitration in the state of Washington where the employer has prevailed. That has gone through the grievance process and through an arbitration. We'll probably get a lot of requests and interest in our case. The cases that have been litigated on the COVID vaccine prior to this case, the employer prevailed for a variety of reasons that did not occur in our case. So it's really good news. With that, we'll be bringing an action for council to take to lift the emergency proclamation, but the COVID mandate will remain. Yeah.
Is there an opportunity for the plaintiff to appeal?
No, our contract has final and binding arbitration. And so the parties both agree that if they submit something to arbitration, that the resolution of that will be final. Technically, there's a way to appeal a final and binding arbitration to Superior Court. It happens. Yeah, it happens very rarely. There's always an exception, but the exception is extremely rare. On that note, we hope to open bargaining next month with the Teamsters for a successor collective bargaining agreement. The Teamsters agreement expires at the end of 2023, so we'll be looking to get a new agreement in place with the Teamsters. So we'll be engaging in that bargaining process over the summer and fall. All the finalists for the emergency management coordinator, communications coordinator, and community events coordinators have been selected. So we will be finalizing that work this week. We had wonderful applicants, really difficult choices to make. And so we were really thrilled with the engagement we had with the applicants throughout this process. And then finally, we are engaged in a search for an interim finance director. So I've done interviews, reached out to a bunch of firms. We hope to have an interim in place by May 8th. Our finance director is concluding her time with the city of Duvall at the very end of May. We do not anticipate being able to get a final finance director selected and onboarded probably August, September. So we'll have about 2 to 3 months where we'll need an interim solution. So we're hoping to finalize that in the next few weeks. And with that, next slide, which is, are there any questions for me?
I'm not seeing anything, City Administrator McNabb, and I just wanted to say thank you to everyone that we had some hard decisions to make in 2021. It was a tough pull to get council's approval for our vaccine policy, but being the first city in the state to have an employer prevail speaks strongly to the due diligence that our team made internally to not only respect the will of employees, but to keep our employees safe and follow the rule of law. And it's I will say that I do know for a fact that HR directors across the state were receiving this news today. So it is likely that to the city administrator's point that we will receive lots of questions about how we went about our policy, and it's likely to become a model for the state of Washington and potentially others as well. So that's exciting news, and with really strong legal support and staff support, we were able to keep our employees protected and be the first municipality in Washington state with a fully vaccinated workforce and have it prevail. So it was always about the health and safety of our employees and community. And I think that we can see in the fact that we never had to shut down full departments, that what we did was the right thing. And as we move into the endemic stage, we are prepared for whatever comes at us next, especially with the hiring of an emergency management coordinator. So thank you all that participated in that process. It's been a hard 3 years, and this is a really strong testament to the commitment to our employees' health and safety. So thank you. All right, and then moving on to council committee reports. We don't have committees currently, so we'll move on to other council reports. If any council member has anything they'd like to share, now would be the time, and please go ahead and raise your hand. Councilmember Naplin?
Yeah, I had a couple things to report on. First, I attended 3 different meetings. I'll just really briefly, I attended the Snoqualmie Valley Outdoor Recreation Action Team meeting, and we had a very interesting presentation that looked at trail counter data and, which trails are popular, what time of the year, how they peak. It was quite fascinating. And it got my wheels turning about, it'd be really interesting to find out how many people use our trail. Anyway, the little counters, I think they're infrared or something, but you can disguise them at the side of the trail. But I would be really curious how many, the volume of, the people that come here and use our trail. I don't know if that's a possibility at some point, but it got me interested. I also attended East Side Transportation Partnership meeting, and I forwarded out the presentation that had been given at that meeting, so it should be in your inboxes. I also attended the Snoqualmie Valley Mobility Coalition, and one announcement or information that was shared had to do with the community van, and I don't think it really gets used as much as they would like. And what's interesting, from my understanding of what they presented, is you need to have some level of training to be able to check out the van to use it. And they really want to make sure that organizations, nonprofits know that this is a resource, and you just need to get a driver trained. You can borrow the van, use it for whatever you need to use it for, and it's there as a resource. Anyway, so there might be an information sheet that we can get and possibly forward to some of the organizations we work with Human Services. But they were really trying to spread the word. And so I offered that, we have a distribution list that we use for our Human Services grant, and maybe we can send it out. So that may or may not be coming. And then finally, something very fun to talk about is DECA, which is a club at the high school, is having a pickleball tournament. And I was approached, I guess the mayor originally was going to maybe be able to do the pickleball, and then there was a conflict. And so I was approached to find out, anyone on council, possibly want to do it. And I already have a possible conflict, so I can't really commit. And so I sent an email, forwarded an email, and if anyone is interested, it would be really fun to have the council be represented. So it would be Duvall against Carnation. And so I really feel like we need to have a strong showing here, which is lucky I wouldn't be able to participate because it would not be a strong showing. But I feel like maybe someone else could. So anyway, think about it.
Thank you, Councilmember Naplin. And just for the record, I'm having surgery, so that's why I can't attend. Otherwise, I was all in. Surgery date was not really negotiable on that. And I did, city administrator let me know that Councilmember Levitt had his hand raised and I missed it. So Councilmember Levitt, if I missed you, please feel free to speak up now and share or provide questions on whatever topic it was that I missed. And my sincere apologies for that.
That's okay. I will bring it up at another point. All good. Thanks. Though.
Okay. Thanks, Councilmember. All right. Any other council reports?
Right, Mayor.
Okay, Mayor Pro Tem, it took a minute for the full screen to show up there. So we're there now. The owl's working.
I think you were asking to confirm, Councilmember Naplin, what date the DECA thing is. Is that?
It's May 13th.
It's
I'm not because I want to participate.
The thing that I just wanted to say is tomorrow at 10 a.m. What did I say? Grateful Bread? Is that what I told you? At Grateful Bread is a council chat. I didn't realize until the other day that I had a conflict, and so Councilmember Naplin and I think Schaefer said he was coming for a little bit. And so to other council members, if you want to go, just email Jennifer so that we can make sure we don't have a quorum. But it's just from 10 to 11 at Grateful Bread. Oh, and then the other thing is on Saturday, I attended, if you've noticed all the fencing around the old Union Bank building for Redemption Church, they had a christening or kind of just to, bless the start of construction. So I attended that at noon on Saturday, and it was really great. It was pouring rain, but everyone had umbrellas or just the hood, like a true Washingtonian, I suppose. I had an umbrella, of course, but it was a really great showing for that, and I know they're really excited to get going on it. That's it.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Is there anyone else? I'm going to double check my participants to make sure Councilmember Levitt doesn't have his hand raised. All right, thank you. And it does, City Administrator advised me that I neglected to ask for approval of the consent agenda. So if it's okay with council, I would like to ask for a motion at this point to make sure that we get that completed. Is there a motion?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve this evening's consent agenda. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say no. Motion passes. And with that, we move on to new business. And it's the first up is the Human Services and Grant Funding Policy.
All right, I guess I'll kick it off if our clerk wouldn't mind sharing that document I sent earlier. I emailed this out to the whole council as well. So myself, Councilmember Mercer and Supple got together, reviewed all the applications and just had a chance to discuss the request and money we had budgeted. I was panicking for a moment because I thought I remembered 20,000 for each year. And so when I reached out to our finance director, she quickly confirmed that Councilmember Supple was right. It's 40 per year. So I was like, oh, okay, we're a lot closer now. So basically, yeah, sorry, the format's sort of hard to.
Let's see if I can.
Okay, yeah, on the bigger screen. Yeah, on Zoom, it shows up kind of odd too. It's like not full screen, it's weird. Hopefully it's okay for everyone else. So basically, I like to bring two options. We usually do that. One, so the total requested amount is $44,000. There were what, 6 applicants. They're all applicants that have applied before and received money before, and also confirmed today from Sherry that they were all in good standing and complied with all the previous reporting requirements. So we're all good to go on that. So the requested amounts are listed there. Option 1, if we had to only spend the 40,000 for this year that's budgeted, that's our recommendation. We scored them on different criteria. If you've never been a part of that process, there's just different questions like, are they professionally administrated or do they put an emphasis on volunteers? Do they use the funds to try and match to get more money? And then of course, making sure that the city, this money would not be their sole source of income, that they at least have other ways to pay for projects. So really simple, the scores, and they do tend to fall here with the Holy Innocents Food Pantry and the Snoqualmie Valley Senior Center tend to score a little higher for a couple of reasons if you were to look at those criteria and get a little more in depth. So we thought an easy way to do it would be to take off 1,000 off the requested of the 4 lower scoring. And by lower, it's not a lot lower, but it definitely, there were the 2 that rose to the top. So giving fully funding the 2 top scored requests, and then taking 1,000 off. So that would be option 1, giving 3,000 out of the 4,000 requested, 9,000 out of the 10,000 requested to Empower Youth Network. And whoops, that should be 3,000, not.
Yeah, the top line.
Yeah. This is me doing this like, an hour before the meeting, so apologies, that's wrong. So that should be, the requested amount was 4,000, so option 1 for Encompass would be giving them 3,000. And same thing for Friends of Youth, obviously I copied and pasted. They requested 4,000, so option 1 would be 3,000. And then Holy Innocents Food Pantry and Snoqualmie Valley Senior Center both requested 10,000 and granting them that goal. Of course, in option 2, which I probably messed up too, I got one of them right. Well, I'll resend this, I'll correct that later and resend it just so you're not all horribly confused about what you're saying yes to, but the option would be to fully fund everybody that requested and pull that 4,000 from another fund. Where that would be from, I don't know. I just wanted to throw that out there. So basically, Option one is fully fund Holy Innocents Food Pantry and Snoqualmie Valley Senior Center requests, and then take 1,000 off of each of the lower scoring for organizations. Though lower scoring, they are all wonderful organizations that support a lot in my community. And then Councilmember Mercer and Duvall, I don't know if you wanted to chime in with any thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, I think to your point, Mayor Pro Tem, that's the challenge of sort of splitting hairs, and, you know, we're with some of the economic contractions, particularly the food pantry. I mean, we focused on the discussion on sort of breadth and reach and what they could do in terms of the value add. I think there were some specific services offered by Snoqualmie Valley Senior Center and Holy Innocents with the food pantry that were particularly resonant, you know, right now while we're going through. I think the other thing that I sort of raised is, you know, just with the inflation, you know, that's one of the things that potentially would make finding the additional $4,000 potentially more relevant, because we are looking at sort of a 10% inflation rate from when we sort of did the budgeting, and you could make a case either way, but I think the consensus we reached was we really didn't want to not fund any. We'd rather do a little bit of trade-off in terms of so that everyone could get some benefit, and then really focus on the ones that sort of have the most reach at the present time.
Councilmember Sepple?
Yeah, the scoring was really close, and it would have been rather difficult to just drop somebody like Acres of Diamond. You could have dropped them and then everything would have balanced out, but the scoring was so close between them and Power Youth and Encompass that it seemed to make more sense to just level set those with dropping them by 1,000 and getting under the 44,000. Getting 44,000 down to 40,000.
Mayor, you have a couple hands.
It looks like I see Councilmember Schaefer and then Councilmember Napland.
I think Councilmember Nathan is first. So.
Oh,
All right.
I just wanted to double check. The way to get it to add up to 44,000, I think might need Encompass and Friends of Youth to have requested 5,000.
Yes.
Is that right?
Actually.
Is it that way?
Yeah, I fixed it. John, if you unshared, I can share.
They just got mixed. Okay. Yeah, I mean, $4,000 difference is not that much, but I really don't have a problem because it was so close. Going over by $4,000. That's just my own feeling. And I just want to express a huge thank you to everyone who worked on this, and hopefully it was fun. I mean, being able to give money to organizations is pretty exciting. So thank you for that work.
I think I have it right now. That's my.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Sorry about that. I was in a rush earlier.
All right, Councilmember Schaefer?
Yeah, and I just want to reiterate, I guess, what Jennifer said. I mean, these organizations do so much good for the community and the surrounding area, all of Snoqualmie Valley. I think this type of contribution from the city is well justified. I know we already increased it this year, but bumping it up to 44,000, I think, is completely justified. I think we'll have good support from the community as well. So I'd certainly go in that direction.
All right. Any other comments or feedback? I guess a question to close the gap would be, does anybody have any objections to Councilmember Schaefer and Councilmember Naplin's request to go over the budgeted amount for this year and fund 44,000? I'm not seeing any objections, so I'll take that as no objections, and council supports that action. But I do not believe I don't believe council scheduled to vote on this tonight. Is that correct?
Mayor, I do think we need to vote on it. We do not have an agenda bill. So are we able to just make a motion and pass it though, without an agenda bill? Yeah.
You
Yeah.
can.
The policy, the human grants services policy requires that approval be made by the last council meeting in April.
Yep. So it will need to be done without an agenda, Bill.
So with that, I would make a motion to fully fund all 6 of the human services grant requests for the total of 44,000 and as outlined in option 2 on the screen currently.
Second.
All right, any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say no. Motion passes. And with that, we'll move on to the discussion on body worn cameras that was pulled from the consent agenda. Chief DeBach?
Good evening, Mayor, Council, City staff, members of the committee who are present. I'm Chief Duvall, Duvall Police Department. I'll be here this evening providing you with a presentation on body worn cameras. Just waiting on the clerk.
It's behind this, yeah. I put it top of rather than trying to put it there. Oh, there we go. Let's start again.
You can go. Slide. Allegations against law enforcement have increased the need for additional transparency and accountability. The current trend is to use body worn cameras. To accomplish this, with 60% municipalities already using this type of technology. Our police department has and always will maintain the highest level of transparency, accountability, and trust with our community. And body worn cameras will be an additional tool to aid us in this effort. Next slide, please. Here are just some of the benefits of the body worn cameras. They decrease false claims of unlawful use and unprofessional conduct, improving officer safety, increase rapport between the officers and the community they serve, and then the efficiency and evidence collection. Next slide. Our bid solicitation was based on recommended vendors that were approved by the members of WASPIC, which is Washington State Sheriff's and Police Chiefs Organizations. 3 providers were deemed acceptable and had comparable contracts and clients within the state of Washington. Those vendors were Axon, LensLock, and Motorola or WatchGuard. Our selection process consisted of back gathering and meeting with these service providers and their current customers. Next slide. The first vendor was Axon. They are the most popular by far, but they are the most expensive. I would like to inform you that the prices that were provided in the agenda bill are not correct. They provided us an updated quote that was only good through 4/14/23. The total price was updated on the slide for that particular quote. But then since I prepared this presentation, they sent me a new quote yesterday on 4/17. And they have now increased their price, the final price to $115,019.54. And that quote is only good until May 12th. So we've been seeing a consistent rise in their prices, anywhere between 6 and this one's 15,000 change in price. So it tells you a little bit about this company. Slide 6, next slide. The next vendor is LensLock. They are a well-established company in California and they're fairly limited exposure here in Washington State. They do have plans in opening a Pacific Northwest office most likely in the Bellevue, Seattle area in 2024. Our experience with them has been extremely positive, and we have received active reviews from their current customers regarding the quality of the equipment and their customer service. Next slide. Motorola is our third and final vendor that we looked at. They actually purchased WatchGuard, which was its own independent company up until 2019. The most notable difference between this camera and the other two is they have detachable batteries on their camera, and they refresh their equipment every 36 months instead of 30 months, which acts on a lens lock bolt, refresh their equipment at 30 months instead of 36. So that was the two major differences. I did speak with a local agency who is using WatchGuard currently and discovered that they're very unhappy with the product. Their complaints at the last chief's meeting was the batteries weren't lasting an entire shift, sometimes only up to 6 hours, and that their customer service has been less than stellar. Next slide, please. So after extensive research and planning, we are recommending LensLock to be our future vendor. They offer the best bang for our buck. They're compatible with our CAD system, which is through Redmond Police Department, and their customer service has been impressive through this entire process. Next slide. So we did conduct a town hall community meeting on March 8th. There was a few participants there, and I made a list of questions that were presented that night, and then Administrator McNabb also put together a list for your packet for you to review as well, regarding some of the questions that we received and information she's providing from the law. First question was, will officers notify me if their body camera is on? The answer is yes. No member of this department may record face-to-face conversations without first announcing to everyone present that the conversation is going to be recorded and ensuring the announcement is recorded. There are exceptions. The exceptions would be pursuant to a warrant, or when the communication is an emergency nature or related to a communication by a hostage or holder or the barricaded suspect. Next question we received was, can I tell an officer to stop recording me? It depends. Our policy gives officers discretion to stop recording in circumstances where respect for an individual's privacy outweighs the need to record an event. Such circumstances can include natural death scenes, death notifications, child or sexual assault victim interviews, cultural or religious objections to being recorded, or when use of a camera would impede or limit the cooperation of the victim or witness. Also, officers will ask for consent to record prior to entering a private residence. If any person with legal standing, for example, a victim or witness who is the resident of that house, or they have the right to be in that home, denies permission to record, the officer may stop the recording. The next question was, how do I request the footage and will I be charged a fee? This is pretty expensive. Maybe under RCW 42.56, it allows for law enforcement agencies to charge a reasonable cost for redacting video and the cost for copying the video. The exceptions to this would be a person directly involved in the recording an incident and their attorney, a person or his attorney who requests recording relevant to a criminal case involving that person, executive directors from the Washington State Commission of African American Affairs, Asian Pacific Affairs, or Hispanic Affairs, an attorney who represents a person in a potential or existing civil cause for action involving a denial of civil rights under the federal or state constitution or a violation of the United States Department of Justice settlement agreement, and explains the relevancy of the requested video. And Washington State does specify what is required in the request for the body-worn camera video. We can provide that to the person when they request, basically the name, the incident number, the date and time, location of the incident type of thing will be all included in their request. Washington State does limit disclosure of body-worn camera footage in certain circumstances, such as images that contain areas of medical facilities, counseling, or therapeutic programs. If the video contains information that meets the definition of protected health information, if there's images of the interior of a place of residence where the person has reasonable expectation of privacy, The video contains nudity, explicit images, minors, those types of things, deceased personnel. Any above scenarios that we just discussed, we may release the video with the relevant video redacted, which means it's going to be blocked or blurred, and or the audio redacted, which means we would remove the sound. If none of the above scenarios exist, the video will be released unredacted, depending on whether the victim has requested a non-disclosure. Washington State does identify some exceptions for the disclosure of offensive or private videos listed as not subject to disclosure. You can receive a copy of the video if state law defines as a disclosable to the public if you are directly involved with the incident. It's kind of like the same as we just covered a few minutes ago. You are an attorney, you are, executive director of the Washington State Commission on American and African Affairs, Asian Pacific Affairs, or Hispanic Affairs. Same people we listed above. And then a suspect of a crime is subject to the same laws of all requesters of body worn cameras and has to follow the same process. The next question we received was, will the SRO be recording students? So this, the answer is yes. If there is a crime occurring where the officer feels the need to turn on his camera on, they can do so. If the footage is requested, most likely the footage will be redacted because it will contain juveniles. And then it's, they asked how will it be used in public spaces? And that also depends. Officers will record where people are lawfully exercising their freedom of speech or in a place of worship only when there is reasonable suspicion to believe that criminal activity is occurring or will occur. Since schools and community centers are generally public spaces, officers may record, however, because disclosure of images of minors are presumed highly offensive. And images of identifiable minors are always exempt from disclosure, so they will be redacted from the videos. Officers will not record in the interior medical and mental health counseling or therapeutic facilities. However, if the officer is there for a direct law enforcement purpose, such as a crime is in progress, they will be recording. And when do officers turn their cameras on or off? Members should remain sensitive to the dignity of individuals being recorded and exercise sound discretion or with respect to privacy, discontinuing recording whenever it is possible or reasonably appears that such privacy may outweigh the legitimacy of law enforcement interest in recording. Requests by members of the public to stop recording should be considered using the same criteria. Recording should resume when privacy is no longer an issue or the situation is changed to fit the criteria for recording. So those were the questions we received at the City Hall. Now I was curious if you had any additional. Yes.
I just sort of have one question, it's related to the body cam, but I just don't know today in terms of, are the vehicles fitted with cameras? Do you have dash cams?
Not currently.
Okay, and my follow-up question was gonna be if there was an alignment in terms of data storage and videos, but at this point, it sounds like would be the body worn camera, and if they would ever be used or they're configured in a way that they could be used in a pursuit versus
so yeah, we can set the indications for when the camera is activated. Because you can activate it manually or it can be activated automatically. We can set those limitations, like if we're driving a certain speed, or if we turn our light, if we draw a weapon, if we draw our taser out, we can set those limits. We know when we want the cameras to be actually activated, that's not manually activated. So if we are in a pursuit, we can set that on the cameras to
based on GPS and speed and everything. Okay, thank you.
And then the answer to your question about the body cameras, LensLock does offer that technology, and it would be interchanged with our cameras, and would be recording the same evidence program and everything.
Thank you.
If we decide to do that.
It's sometimes nice because we find, technology A doesn't work with technology B, and you mentioned the CAD system, so that's true.
The best thing about the 30 months with the turnover is they replace everything in 30 months. So we get all brand new equipment, all brand new cameras, and it's refreshed because technology is, like you're saying, it's outdated quickly. So.
Thank you, Chief Duvall. Councilmember Napland.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you for putting this together, and I know City Administrator McNabb, you work on the frequently asked questions as well. I hadn't really thought that much about body cameras. until I attended the town hall and then all these questions, you know, I thought, well, what about this situation? And what about that situation? I came home and told my daughter, she's like, is Officer Dunkley gonna be walking around recording me all day? I mean, she didn't say it like that, but I'll be in trouble for even bringing her up, but, yeah, and so this answers all those questions, and I think that even though people potentially, you know, there weren't very many people at the town hall, I think once they start seeing officers walking around with cameras, they might have questions, so, this was great, very comprehensive, and I felt reassured of how they're going to be used and that privacy would be respected, so thank you for putting it together.
Right, thank you. Do we have a motion to approve this contract?
I move to approve Addenda Bill 23-23A, approving Duvall Police Department's recommendation to sign a 5-year contract with Linslock for BWC services.
Second.
Any further discussion? Double check Councilmember Levitt. Not seeing a hand. So all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say no. Motion passes. And with that, we'll move on to the other consent agenda item that was moved to the general meeting, and that is the nonprofit economic development grant policy, which was on consent agenda. Director, our city administrator, Nab, are you leading this one?
I am, thank you.
Great.
So first, to address a couple questions that came up with the grant policy itself, which is the subject of the agenda bill. So this was an effort to put a policy in place to get started. I listed $50,000 a year in grant availability as kind of an opening number. It was, you know, subject to whatever the council wanted to do. So there wasn't, I would say I didn't put, there was no data to support why I picked that number. I picked the number because the policy that I wrote is reflective of the human services grant policy. We had used $40,000 as our annual amount for that policy. And I thought $50,000 would be potentially maybe a little more robust because some of the grants that might come for economic development and tourism might be substantial requests, and so we might need that amount. But there, I will share with you, I did not get that amount from any other policy that I observed. It was just a number, kind of thinking about mirroring it to the human services grant policy and program that we have. It can be administered in a couple of different ways. So a question that came is, would it be up to 50,000 or would we be committing $50,000 irrespective of whether the grant ideas were worthy and matched the criteria? And I think the answer is it would be up to $50,000. No requirement that you spend the full 50 if you don't get a grant that meets the criteria listed in the policy. So that's the first thing that I kind of wanted to point out. At this point, any questions about why I chose that amount and what my intentions were on it?
Great. Councilmember Schaefer.
Just a, I guess, a comment more than a question. It's really 50,000 per year, not for the whole biennium. So total is 100,000. Correct.
Correct.
Good. No, and that's the way I do it. So that's good. And the yeah, as far as your comment, I completely agree. It would be up to the $50,000 limit, and it's also has to pass the purview of the Economic Development Committee as well.
Correct. The second question was whether or not community events would be incorporated into the eligibility for the grants. I think depending on the community event where the nonprofit was seeking a grant for that community event, as long as it meets the criteria, it would be included in the policy as an opportunity. So I think I didn't specify it, but a community event could meet the grant criteria depending on what it is and what it's delivering to the community. The next question was whether or not we would require receipts and a report out from those who receive the grants, and the answer is absolutely. What the report out might look like would depend whether they would come and we would do kind of a presentation from the grant recipients or require a written report. But, you know, so I don't know what that would look like, what the report out would look like, but absolutely we would require receipts and documentation of how the money was spent. And then the last question was on timing. So in the agenda bill, I noted the structure for the timeline that I put together is reflective of passing the budget and having enough time after passage of the budget for the finance team and the clerk's office to take a breath and then start with the new grant process. Ideally, I may be asking for the human services grant process to move to this February to April timeline, just because starting it in January comes on the heels of the budget, and it's kind of a crunch time for the finance department. So it'd be preferable to have them both on a schedule that's just a little more delayed after the beginning of the year. So as fairly evident, the dates have passed. So my goal would be, should this policy get approved, that I would open it in June. And so this first implementation year would be a little off, but following, it would be the June to April timeframe. Or I mean, the February to And so those were the questions I got on the policy itself.
Okay, are there any further? Oh, I'm sorry, City Administrator McNabb.
Oh, that's okay. So that kind of, I want to take a pause so that we can deal with the policy, and then I have kind of some second thoughts on some issues that were raised by Councilmember Schaefer. So at this point, it would be whether or not we want to pass or move to approve the nonprofit grant policy.
Councilmember Schaefer?
Let's see, I moved, sorry. We're ready to do the recommendation now. Recommendation, okay. I move to approve policy to support nonprofit economic development and tourism grants in the maximum amount of $50,000 for 2023 and $50,000 for 2024. And this is agenda bill. Yeah, thank you. Agenda bill 2320.
Second.
Yeah, it's been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? Seeing, Councilmember Supple.
Can you, so I've been in contact with Duvall, Art and Wine people. And they're interested in applying for the grant. So I'm wondering, what's the process for them to actually apply for it? And when can they do that?
So once this gets passed, we will put together a grant application.
Okay.
And then post on the website the opportunity to apply. And my hope would be that I can get that open by June, in the beginning of June.
Okay.
So probably May, the rest of April, and May to get all the business end of it done, and then open it up June 1st, assuming June 1st is a regular business day. I don't know this. I don't know. June 1st is a Thursday, so that should work.
So that's the date that they can go online and apply?
That is my goal. I will try to stick to that date.
They scheduled the block in September. And I'm wondering if it's possible to get that moved to go out in at all.
I can try to do that. Yes, I will prioritize making that happen. The other thing that will have to happen, not exactly simultaneously, but awfully close, is we need to convene an economic development committee, just like we did with the services grant committee to review the applications.
Great, thank you. Councilmember Schaefer?
Yeah, I just gonna mention to Mike that, there's a possibility, it's primarily just been discussed by me, of expanding this art and wine walk into more of an art, wine, food walk that would be a little bit more comprehensive. And you might, who is this, by the way?
Oh, this is Pam Martin. She's the executive director of the Duvall Arts Center.
Yeah,
And
okay.
they're basically the host of it. And they're looking for volunteers.
I don't know if they'd be interested in that or not, but I'd certainly like to see it expanded in that respect.
I kind of doubt if there's time for that this year.
Yeah, okay. They might just throw that out.
But I can bring it up.
That next time. Okay, thank you. That's it.
And Councilmember Schaefer, to that point, for the council's benefit, with the hiring of a community events coordinator, this is something that will be able to be looked at once the core functions of community, cultural commission, et cetera, are taken over and brought back up to speed with the city portion. That will be one of the things that the community events coordinator will be looking at, is helping our local events expand and get more bang for their buck out of the events and improve them for our community. So that will be part of their job. And luckily, thankfully, we're going to have somebody on board very soon to help with that for the next year.
Yeah, great, thank you.
Mayor, I had a quick,
yes, Mayor Protem.
just to follow up on the economic development, I co-counsel, I've got all the names of people interested in the different committees, and I'll be able to get something by the next meeting. I'm still in catch-up mode, but I'm almost there, like at the end of the time, so we'll have that ready for you. Okay, great.
Thank you. Any other comments on this agenda, Bill?
Mayor, can I just address the art and wine walk really quick? We did apply for a Port of Seattle grant where we applied for about $2,500 for that particular event for marketing and advertising. And we should know here pretty quickly if we get it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, any further questions from council? Great. Hopefully I'll see the group here again in a second. All right. With that, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say no. Motion passes. And with that, that is our last item of business this evening. So if there are no objections, we are adjourned. Thank you all. I'm going to go back to my garbage world. Bye-bye.
Mayor, can you hear us?
Yes.
Okay, can we pull back the adjournment, because I have just one more thing to finish up on economic development.
There you go. So we didn't have a consent in that case, so go for it, City Administrator McNabb.
So there's one other aspect of economic development. So we now covered the nonprofit grant, and so have committed at most 100,000 of the $250,000 to that. Last council meeting, we went through a process of doing a dot exercise, and what we did was prioritize that list of things that came from the business community. So there was also an interest in a request for potentially dusting off the 2015 economic development element and this strategic action plan that went with it, and figuring out whether we could pull other ideas from that. I did talk to Director Thomas about what the staff impact of that work would be. It'd be about 40 hours of staff work time to actually go through that element, take a look at it, figure out what's been done, what hasn't been done, what's left. Same with the strategic action plan. Right now, it would displace some work. I'm not saying that we can't do it, but it would be a displacement of community development work. There's a second possibility of still doing that work, but doing it by council committee. So being able to pull from those things other ideas that were not from the Chamber of Commerce list and from the business community, because we expanded that survey to the whole business community. So at this time, I'm gonna kind of take a pause until I get council direction on looking to use the remainder of the money on staff directed events until I know what council's appetite is for doing that review of the economic development element from 2015 and whether we want to pull more ideas. So just want to offer I'm in pause mode on the rest of it right now until council decides if you want to do that activity and in what form, whether you want to direct staff to do that work or do it as a council.
Councilmember Schaefer.
Let's see, if there be others on the council willing, I'd certainly be willing to take a crack at that. Now, even then, there may be a little bit of staff time, but hopefully very minimal. I'm thinking a little bit, questions for Steve, Laura, that type of thing. Hopefully, quick questions as opposed to, significant amount of time devoted by their teams. So I'm not saying there wouldn't be any staff involvement, but I think that, the council could probably take some of that on, at least I'd be willing to. If we could establish a economic development committee, even if that's an ad hoc committee to begin with, I think that would be a good item for that committee to work.
Councilmember Naplin.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of 40 hours of staff time during such a difficult, we have so much, such a heavy workload right now. That seems like it would be asking a lot. And so I'd be very willing to go through some of those documents as well, unless someone else would rather do it. And so that's my stand on it. Because I just remember when those documents were brought forward, I thought, oh, wow, what a treasure trove of ideas. I want to dig through these and I just hadn't had a chance. And it could be there aren't any ideas that we haven't already come up with, but it could be we find some really neat ideas. And so I would like to look through it or someone to look through it.
And would the idea then be go through like a second thought exercise once we did that?
Yeah, so that's probably what I would do, is if council came up with more ideas that were not in the list of priorities that we worked on last week, that we would just redo that exercise. I mean, there's no harm in doing it again, and honestly, probably what I would do is prepare a written report that reflects the exercise that we did last week with the staff feedback, because some of the staff feedback is relevant on, well, a couple of the items might require overtime or more staffing or specialized equipment that you might want to know about when you're kind of looking at it again with fresh eyes. So I'd probably prepare a written report ahead of another prioritization exercise. But happy to do it again. I think I ordered like 1,200 dots. So
Great color, so a bunch of them.
No, sounds good.
All right, that was it for me.
All right.
I'm sorry.
Councilmember Schaefer.
Yeah, and I'll send out an email notification, but I'm gonna miss the next Cal Council meeting again because I'm traveling at that point. But is there something we can do in the meantime? Because I do, like I say, I do feel a sense of urgency here that try to get this going so we can get some, funds allocated for this summer. And so.
I'm willing.
Councilmember Naplin.
I just want to say I would be willing to commit in the next week if we wanted to form an ad hoc to just try to get through it and see if we can pull out some other ideas that we hadn't thought of. I mean, unless there's other people who would want to do it, if you're on a time crunch and you want to do it,
We get 3 people.
Yeah. Others want to, I just wanted to throw that out there. I'm willing to do it. I'd be willing to. I don't know.
That'd be great.
Sorry, Mayor, I have a question or maybe this is for Mr. Kenny. If we form an ad hoc committee that wants to do work in the next week, is that something we need to formally agree to in this meeting? I know in the past I feel like we've adopted in consent agendas, our committees or something like that, or head nods enough for, you know.
I think head nods are enough, aren't they, Mr. Kenny?
Okay, great.
Okay, well, we'll get the documents over to our new ad hoc committee. And we'll work together to see what can be done.
All right, thank you. And so, City Administrator McNabb, anything else? All right, none. So seeing nothing else and no objections, we are officially adjourned at 8:47 p.m. Thank you all. We'll see you soon. Bye-bye.
I didn't. Sure.